Welcome to the Paranormal M channel. Can't sleep again? No worries. Lie down, throw on your headphones, and turn on your nightlight. I'm going to share some of my own paranormal experiences with you. Hopefully, they'll help you relax. By the way, thank you so much for sending in your stories. Please keep them coming. I genuinely love doing this. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new videos. All right, let's get into it. Okay, so let me tell you about this weird little piece of my childhood. My grandparents had these close friends, an elderly couple named Arthur and Mabel. They were the kindest people. Arthur always smelled like pipe tobacco and wood polish, and Mabel baked something every time you blinked. They had this old lamp in their house, and for as long as I can remember, they told the strangest story about it. Now this lamp was old, like 1920s Art Deco old, with a heavy brass base and a stained glass shade that always looked a little too fragile. And according to them, for more than 40 years, the same thing kept happening. The light bulb would just vanish. Not burn out, not flicker and die, actually disappear. They'd be sitting there reading, light on, everything normal, and then at some point, they'd realize the lamp was dark. They'd come over to check, and the whole bulb would be gone. Later, it would turn up somewhere else in the house. Sometimes in obvious places, like right in the middle of the living room floor, or in the little drawer under the lamp. But sometimes, it got absurd. They told me about the times it showed up in the bathroom sink, once in the freezer, sitting on top of a bag of peas. One bulb was found inside the tank of the toilet, years later, when Arthur finally opened it to fix the flusher. The one that really got me, though, was when they found it inside the lamp's own base. You actually had to unscrew a little panel with a screwdriver to get in there. They joked that if it ever appeared in the car, they were moving. When I was younger, I just thought it was a funny, exaggerated story. You know how older folks sometimes have that one running joke that never dies? They'd say, "Oh, guess where the lamp bulb was this time?" And I'd laugh and roll my eyes. It was just part of being at their house. Then I saw it happen. I was about 11 when this all went from cute story to, okay, what the hell? My grandmother got really sick and ended up in the hospital for a while, so I stayed with Arthur and Mabel for about a week. They put me in the guest bedroom, and of course, that's where the infamous lamp lived. The lamp sat on a little wooden bedside table, maybe 2 feet from my head when I lay down. For the first couple of nights, they left it on for me. I actually preferred that. It made the strange house feel a little less unfamiliar. So the lamp stayed on all night, this warm yellow glow in the corner of the room. By the third night, I was used to it. I remember checking the old digital clock on the dresser. It was around 2:47 a.m., something oddly specific that just burned into my brain. I wasn't fully asleep, more in that fuzzy in-between state, wrapped up in the blankets. And then, suddenly, the room went dark. No slow flicker, no pop, just instant black. I jolted awake, heart hammering. The door didn't open. Nobody came in. I didn't hear footsteps or anything. It was just dark. Completely. The kind of dark where your brain starts inventing shapes. My only decent light source was my little silver Nintendo DS, so I flipped it open and cranked the brightness all the way up. That cold blue glow felt like a lifeline. I slid out of bed, walked the 2 steps to the table, and pointed the DS screen at the lamp. No bulb. I don't mean it was loose. I don't mean it had fallen onto the table. I mean the socket was empty, completely empty. And I swear to you, I had looked at that lamp right before trying to fall asleep. The light had been on. There's no way I wouldn't have noticed if it went dark earlier. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I just lay there, alternating between playing and listening to every tiny creak the house made, absolutely convinced that if I looked up, that bulb would be floating in midair or something. Morning finally came. Sunlight was leaking around the curtains, and I could hear Arthur banging around in the kitchen. Eventually, I went out and told him what happened. I tried to sound casual, but my voice was shaking. He raised his eyebrows, gave me this little half smile, and said, "Ah, lamp got you, did it?" We went back to the guest room together to look for the bulb. We checked the floor, the bed, under the table. Nothing. Then Arthur reached for the drawer under the lamp. Now, this is important. That drawer was on these old metal rails that screamed every time you opened it. It was loud enough that you'd cringe when you pulled it out. I know because I had opened it earlier to see if there were any books or comics in there. I would have definitely heard it if someone had messed with it in the night. Arthur gripped the handle, yanked it open, screech! And there it was, the bulb, just sitting there in the middle of the drawer, like it had always belonged. He nodded, like this was the most normal thing in the world, and said, "That's the most common place it likes to end up." And I just stood there, skin crawling, because I knew that drawer hadn't opened once while I was in that room. There was no way. It was inches from my head when I slept. That awful metal squeal was impossible to miss. But somehow, between the moment the light went out and the moment the sun came up, the bulb had gone from the lamp, 2 feet from my face, to inside that noisy drawer without a sound. To this day, I can't explain it. I've tried. I've thought about loose fixtures, about someone playing a prank, about my memory being weird because I was half asleep. But every version of that night I replay in my mind hits the same impossible detail. I would have heard that drawer. Years later, after my grandmother's funeral in 2013, I saw Arthur and Mabel one last time. They were both in their early 90s then, still holding hands like teenagers. We didn't talk about the lamp that day. It didn't feel like the moment. After that, I lost touch. The next time I drove past their house, there was a different car in the driveway. Sleek, modern. The kind of thing I couldn't imagine either of them ever driving. I assume they're gone now. And I don't know what happened to that old lamp. Maybe it's in a thrift store somewhere, sitting quietly on a dusty shelf, pretending to be normal. Maybe someone else owns it now and occasionally finds a stray bulb in a place that makes no sense. All I know is that, as a kid, I laughed at their stories. And ever since that one sleepless night, I've never laughed at that lamp again. So, this all happened about 12 years ago, and honestly, I still don't know what to do with it. Let me back up a bit. On my mom's side of the family, things were complicated. My mom, Elena, never really got along with my dad's side, and over time, the tension spread to her own family too. In the late 80s, after a lot of drama that I only know in pieces, she cut off all contact with her parents and siblings. Just done. No calls, no visits, nothing. Because of that, I grew up never meeting my maternal grandparents. I knew they existed, obviously, but they were these vague, ghost-like figures in stories my mom almost never told. No photos around the house, no holiday cards, no, "we should visit them someday." Just silence. Fast forward to around 2012. My mom's father, my grandfather, whom I'd never met, was dying of lung cancer. He was in his late 70s by then. Word somehow got to my mom through one of her sisters that he was trying to make amends before he passed. He wanted to see her again. He wanted to see his grandkids. And my mom? She surprised me. One evening, she sat me down at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had gone cold. She said, "Alex, your grandfather is very sick. He doesn't have much time left. He wants to see me, and he asked if he could meet you." I could see the war going on in her face. Part of her was still that hurt daughter from the 80s, but another part of her was a tired woman who didn't want to carry old grudges anymore. She said, "I'm going to go. I think I need to. But whether you come or not, that's up to you. I won't force you." And I remember thinking, I've gone my whole life not knowing this man, but this might be my only chance. Curiosity and a weird sense of, I don't know, duty, sort of mixed together. So I told her, okay, I'll go. If it means something to him, I'll be there. There's another piece you need for this to make sense. Back then, I had a girlfriend, Sophia. For our 2-year anniversary, I saved up and bought her this delicate silver ring with a tiny blue stone in it. We were at this old seaside amusement pier, one of those places with creaky wooden planks and neon lights that buzz a little too loudly. I gave her the ring while we were at the top of the Ferris wheel, looking out over the water. It was a whole cinematic moment, and I was really proud of myself. She wore that ring all the time, like never took it off. And then one weekend, she went to this outdoor concert with some friends. Big crowd, dancing, people bumping into each other, the usual. Later that night she called me, almost in tears, saying, "Alex, I lost the ring. It just slipped off somewhere. I've looked everywhere. I'm so sorry." I spent the next day calling the venue, messaging their lost and found page, even going down there once to walk around the field myself, staring at the ground like an idiot. But imagine trying to find a tiny silver ring in a field where thousands of people had been dancing all night. It was gone. I accepted that eventually, but it still stung. Okay, so that's all in the background. Now to the visit. My mom and I drove over to the hospice where my grandfather, his name was Victor, was staying. I remember being more nervous than I expected. Like, what do you say to someone who's your grandfather but also basically a stranger? We walked into his room, and he looked small. Smaller than I'd pictured. Thin, gray, hooked up to tubes, but his eyes were sharp. Really sharp. When he saw my mom, I swear his whole face rearranged, like all the years without her just collapsed at once. They hugged and both cried a little, and I kind of stood there awkwardly like, "Hi, I'm your grandson, no big deal." We talked for a while, mostly small talk at first, where I was studying, what I liked to do. He told me a couple of stories about my mom as a teenager, stuff I'd never heard, and my mom just kept wiping her eyes and laughing. Later that afternoon, his pain got pretty bad. The nurse came in and gave him a dose of morphine through his IV. After a few minutes, his speech got slower, and eventually, he drifted off to sleep. My mom and I sat there quietly, just listening to the machines and the muffled sounds from the hallway. About an hour later, he woke up. He blinked a few times, looked around the room, and then said, very calmly, "I just had the strangest dream." My mom leaned in a bit and said, "What did you dream, Papa?" He turned his head toward me, though, like he was talking mostly to me, and said, "There was a young woman with a beautiful ring, silver with a small blue stone. She loved it very much. She was at this big outdoor festival with music playing and everyone dancing. But in the middle of all those people, the ring slipped off her finger." He paused for a moment and closed his eyes, like he could still see it. "She dropped it into the crowd," he went on, "and people were dancing, stepping on it, pushing it into the ground. She tried to find it, but the more she searched, the more it disappeared. In the end, there was nothing left to pick up." My mom and I just stared at each other. She knew about Sophia's ring. She knew where it had been lost. But we had never told anyone in her family any of that. There hadn't even been contact with them. No phone calls, no mutual friends, nothing. I kind of laughed, but it came out shaky. I said something like, "That's oddly specific." Inside, though, I felt this cold shiver run down my spine. We tried to shrug it off as a coincidence. Strange, but still technically possible, right? Plenty of people lose rings. Plenty of people go to concerts. You can rationalize it if you try hard enough. The day went on. Sometimes he would drift off mid-sentence, then wake up and pick up the conversation like nothing had happened. At one point, he started talking about the man with the cape. He said there was a man standing in the living room, his living room, not the hospice room, wearing a long, dark cape. Victor kept glancing toward the corner of the hospice room, like he could see him there. He told my mom, "He's waiting. When I grab his cape, he'll take me with him. Then I'll be on the other side." The way he said it was so matter-of-fact, not scared, not dramatic, just sure. My mom squeezed his hand and said, "You don't have to go with him yet." He smiled a little and said, "I know, not yet." Now, here's where it goes from odd to what on earth. Before we left that evening, my mom leaned over to hug him goodbye. I stepped out into the hallway to give them a moment alone. I could see them from the doorway, though, just talking quietly. Then he reached up, took my mom's hand, pulled her closer, and whispered something in her ear. On the drive home, she was weirdly quiet. I figured she was just emotional from seeing him again after so many years. Finally, halfway down the highway, she said, very softly, "Victor knew something he shouldn't have known." I asked, "What do you mean?" She took a deep breath and told me what he had whispered. He'd said, "Don't let your husband die on that highway. Don't let him end his life there. It won't solve anything. He's stronger than that. Please, remind him. Tell him I said so." Now, you have to understand something. About 10 years earlier, when I was still a kid, my dad had gone through this horrible period at work. The company he worked for manipulated a situation after his own father died and basically tried to push him out while he was grieving. He was exhausted, burned out, and felt completely trapped. Only my mom and my dad knew about that moment. They never told my grandparents on either side. They never told friends. It wasn't some family story that got passed around. It was a secret pain shared by two people and buried. And yet, years later, as he lay dying, with zero contact for decades, my grandfather somehow told my mom, "Don't let your husband end his life on that highway." Not just, "Don't let him do something stupid," or "take care of him." He mentioned the highway, that specific place, that specific act. When my mom told me that in the car, we both just sat there in stunned silence. I remember watching the road blur past and thinking, there's no way he could have known that. None. We tried to reason our way out of it. Maybe he guessed. Maybe he was just saying something symbolic. Maybe it was all morphine-induced rambling and we were connecting dots that weren't there. But then there was the ring, the concert, the color of the stone. Too many details, too specific. Even now, I don't know what to call it. A coincidence? Some kind of strange intuition that people get when they're close to death? Something spiritual? Something in his subconscious that picked up on things no one had told him? I just know this. We had no contact with that side of the family for decades. There were no shared stories, no social media stalking, no quiet phone calls between relatives filling him in. And yet, in one single day, he spoke about two events he should never have known anything about. A lost ring at a crowded festival, and a silent, terrifying moment on a highway 10 years earlier. And in the middle of all of that, he kept talking about the man with the cape, waiting patiently to walk him to the other side. I still don't fully understand what happened in that room, but I think about it a lot. And every time I'm on that highway with my dad in the passenger seat, or at some crowded event where people are dancing and something small could get lost under their feet, those words come back to me. My grandfather's voice, quiet but certain. He's stronger than that. Don't let him end his life on that highway. Some things you just carry with you, even when you can't explain them. This isn't some epic ghost hunter saga or anything, but if anyone's going to appreciate it, it's probably you. I moved into my first little house about 6 months ago. It's one of those older places, maybe 80, 90 years old, in a small mid-Atlantic town that used to be a big stop for travelers. Old train station, brick storefronts, creaky porches, the kind of place where nobody would blink if you said, "Yeah, that house is probably haunted." Most of what I was doing was basic, new homeowner with too much optimism stuff. Painting, patching, arguing with YouTube tutorials. My dad, Mark, was helping me out, along with my mom, Elena. And in that order, Dad, me, then Mom. We all had these tiny, quick, really specific weird moments that stopped as abruptly as they started. The first thing happened to my dad. We were in the hallway by the old kitchen, and there's this antique doorbell still mounted on the wall. One of those metal chime setups with little plates and coils, the kind that looks like it belongs in a black and white movie. It's not hooked up to a button anymore, but the transformer is still live. I was in the next room rolling paint when I heard Dad go quiet. Then I hear it too. This faint, tinkling ding-ding, like someone was gently messing with the chimes. Not a full ring, more like fingers brushing the metal. Dad looks at me and goes, "Did you hear that?" We stood there for a second listening, but it didn't happen again. We figured maybe it was some kind of electrical interference or vibration from us moving around, and we shrugged it off. Very logical, very boring explanation. And for the record, it has never done it again. Not once. A little while later, days, maybe weeks, Dad was upstairs replacing an outlet in the guest room. I was sitting on the floor behind him with a screwdriver, pretending I knew what I was doing. The stairs come up right outside that room, and from where I was sitting, I could see the top few steps. Out of nowhere, Dad just freezes mid-sentence and turns his head toward the stairs. I'm like, "What?" He squints for a second and says, "I could have sworn I saw a cat just walk up the steps." He described it as this small, dark cat, tail up, trotting up like it knew the place. The thing is, I saw movement too, just in the corner of my eye, like a shadow drifting past the doorway. But when we both leaned out to look, there was nothing. No cat, no sound, just empty stairs. Now, we're both pretty skeptical people. This is the same guy I once sat with on the porch of our family cabin at night, listening to what sounded like heavy boots pacing back and forth on the wooden deck. Clear as day, like someone was patrolling, but no one was there when we checked. Even then, we were like, okay, weird, but there's gotta be some explanation. So with the cat, we were like, shadow, trick of the light, tired eyes, whatever. And then it was my turn. One night around some truly awful hour, like 3 in the morning, I woke up thirsty. You know that half-asleep shuffle where you're basically a ghost yourself? That was me, dragging into the kitchen with the lights off except for the little glow over the stove. The staircase that leads up to the second floor is just off the kitchen, sort of behind me as I open the fridge. I'm standing there, door open, the light spilling into the room, staring blankly at a carton of orange juice like it's a life decision. And from right behind me, down low, near the base of those stairs, I hear this perfectly clear, loud little meow? Not a vague creak, not pipes, not a weird house noise. A cat. A very present, very normal-sounding cat meow. The kind you'd hear if you walked into someone's house and their cat wanted attention. Nothing. No cat on the stairs, no cat in the kitchen, no cat anywhere. And I don't own a cat. I don't even have so much as a bag of cat food in the house. I checked anyway, because of course I did. Opened doors, peeked into corners, even looked outside in case a neighborhood cat had somehow slipped in. It was just me and a very quiet, very old house. I tried to be rational about it. Maybe the house made a weird noise. Maybe my sleepy brain filled it in as a meow. Whatever. It bothered me, but not in a I'm moving out way. More like, huh, that's going in the weird things my house does file. The last thing happened to my mom, and honestly, hers is the one that stuck with me the most. It was a bright afternoon, good light, windows open, absolutely not the setting for a spooky story. My mom was sitting on the couch in the living room, flipping through her phone while I was messing with some shelves. All of a sudden she looks up and asks, very casually, "Did you see that little gray and white cat just walk out of here?" I blink and go, "What cat?" She points toward the doorway that leads into the front hallway and says, "It walked right past the coffee table, tail up, and then just kept going that way." And then she kind of laughs nervously and adds, "Through the wall." She said it like she was trying not to freak herself out, but she was pale. She described this small, short-haired cat with a white chest and gray patches, just strolling out of the living room like it owned the place, and then disappearing straight into the wall where there definitely is no doorway. Now, my mom is a believer. She already knew about Dad thinking he'd seen a cat on the stairs, and she knew about me hearing the phantom meow. So there's this part of my brain going, okay, maybe her mind filled in the blanks. Maybe she wanted it to be a ghost cat. But there's another part of me that remembers how specific she was, the way she said it, the way she kept replaying its path with her finger, like, it walked right there. And here's the strangest part of the whole thing. After that moment, after my mom watched this little gray and white cat just ghost itself through the living room wall, nothing else weird has happened in the house. No more chimes, no more shadows on the stairs, no more mysterious meows in the middle of the night. Just silence. Regular old creaks and pops and HVAC noises. It's like whoever, or whatever, was there finished their little inspection and moved on. So now I'm stuck with this question that I can't quite shake. Were those all coincidences? A powered old doorbell humming at the wrong time, tired eyes catching shadows, a sleepy brain mishearing a sound, and a believer's imagination topping it off. Or, and this is the version I secretly kind of like, was there a local stray passing through? Some little ghost cat doing rounds in an old house in a historic town, just making sure the new human was okay before heading off to wherever ghost cats go. I don't know. I'm still a skeptic. Mostly. But sometimes, when I'm locking up for the night and I walk past the bottom of the stairs, I still catch myself saying, quietly, "Good night, buddy," just in case there's a small, unseen cat listening. So, let me just start by saying, I've never been a full-on non-believer. If anything, I've always kind of wanted to see something. Like, if ghosts are real, cool, let me meet one, right? But now I think I'm actually dealing with something. A ghost, an entity, some leftover energy, I don't know. And it's starting to mess with my ability to work, and I honestly don't know what to do with that. I'm a sound engineer at a big live theater downtown. I started there in early April. The original building went up in the late 1950s, and then they slapped on this huge addition around, 1999. And when I say slapped on, I mean they did it cheap. The layout is ridiculous. There are half floors, like 2.5, 3.5, random staircases to nowhere. If you've worked in live theater, you know the catwalk is never conveniently near the sound or lighting booth, and this place is like a case study in that. The whole building is basically a maze held together by gaffer tape and wishful thinking. Part of my job has basically become figure out whatever nonsense the last people left behind. Untangle cables, trace weird signal paths, label things that should have been labeled 10 years ago. There's this one room we call B17. It's technically at the highest point of the building, but because of the weird floor system, it ended up with that random name. It's also the only room up there. That's where we keep all the really long sound cables, like anything over 50 feet. So I'm up there a lot, just coiling and labeling and trying to bring order to chaos. To get to B17 from my office, you have to go through this bizarre little stair hallway situation. It's like someone started building a stairwell, got bored halfway through, and just kept adding turns. No windows, all concrete, and when the lights are off, it is pitch black. Like, if your phone dies, you live there now. There are several old push-button light switches up there. They are not motion-activated. They are not on timers. I have tested them thoroughly because of what happened next. One afternoon, I'm in B17, sitting on the floor with a pile of cables, labeling them by length. It's quiet. I'm in the zone. And suddenly, the hallway light clicks off. I instantly get annoyed because I assume it's our stage manager, Lena, messing with something in the little booth that's connected to that hallway. She's great, but she loves pressing buttons. So I sigh, grab my phone flashlight, and stomp down that dark hallway to tell her to knock it off. Except, she's not there. The booth is empty. And when I look at the clock, it hits me. She's not even scheduled to be in the building for another 3 hours. So now I'm unsettled. I don't love unexplained stuff when I'm alone in a concrete tunnel. But I tell myself the usual rational things, you know? Old building, faulty wiring, whatever. I go back up to B17 and keep working. A few minutes later, the lights go off again. At this point, I'm irritated and a little freaked out, so I blurt out loud, "Okay, will you knock it off, please?" And the lights click back on. Not flicker, not slowly fade back, just click, on. I stand there, looking at the switch, looking at the ceiling, trying to decide if I'm being pranked or if I've finally lost my grip on reality. In the end, I tell myself it's just some weird fluke and I let it go. Old buildings do strange things, right? The next day, though, something happens that I cannot explain away with old building. I come in the next day. I am the first one in. And that set piece is annihilated. Not just a little broken. The cart is tilted, one wheel snapped, and the glass dome is shattered into pieces all over the stage. Props scattered like somebody threw a tantrum. The platform under it is fine, like nothing else was touched. So I'm standing there thinking, either someone came in after hours, broke in just to wage war on a dessert cart, or I really pissed something off when I yelled in that hallway. What makes this weirder is that most of the places where my instincts go on high alert, the spots where my hackles go up, are in the newer part of the building. B17, that whole hallway system, a couple of the newer catwalks. You'd assume haunted equals old original wing, right? But the unsettling stuff, for me, is mostly in the addition. And then my brain starts doing that thing where it rewinds my entire time there, looking for moments that felt off. The first time I felt it was actually in the original 1950s stage, underneath the deck. I had to install speakers under there. The trap space is huge, like 100 feet across, but low. I'm about 6 foot, and my back just barely clears the beams when I'm walking through. It's dusty, full of old wiring, forgotten props, random bits of lumber. I'm not claustrophobic at all. Crawl spaces, basements, tight catwalks, never been a problem for me. But under that stage, I kept having these waves of get out. Not panic, exactly. Just this heavy feeling that someone was right behind me, watching. Every time I'd stop and turn around, of course, there would be nothing but darkness and plywood. So here's where I'm stuck. I am a skeptic. I am that person who is usually explaining away weird stuff, not encouraging it. But whatever is happening here, it feels different. It feels intentional. And as completely unscientific as this sounds, I cannot shake the feeling that whatever it is a kid. Not evil, not super malevolent, more like mischievous, easily offended maybe, curious. Today was the first day I felt like it was actually following me. I'd be in the new wing, feel that little prickle at the back of my neck, then head to the old stage, and a few minutes later the same feeling would show up there too, like it was trailing me from space to space. And that's where I'm kind of losing it, because it's palpable. It's not just, oh, I creeped myself out. It's like walking into a room where someone's just had an argument. You can't see it, but the air feels thick. I don't get the sense it wants to hurt me, but I also really need to be able to do my job without wondering if some invisible 10-year-old is going to murder the hallway lights or trash another set piece. I've been asking myself, do you talk to these things? Is that a good idea? A bad idea? I can't burn sage or anything dramatic because, fire alarms and sprinkler systems and, hey, why is the sound guy smoking out the building? So for now, I've just been acknowledging it. When the lights flicker or I get that watched feeling, I'll say something like, hey, I'm just working. Please don't mess with the gear, okay? I feel ridiculous, talking to what might just be bad wiring and my overactive brain. But it also feels ruder not to. Whatever it is, ghost, energy, my subconscious having a field day, this whole thing has been wild. And as much as it freaks me out, a tiny part of me is like, well, you wanted to see something. So, I'm still kind of shaky talking about this, but I'll walk you through it from the beginning. First off, a bunch of people had suggested carbon monoxide when I told them what happened. So I went to my husband, Evan, and I'm like, hey, a lot of people are saying this could be a carbon monoxide thing. He looks at me and goes, we've got a detector, remember? I checked the batteries last month. He reminds me we don't even have gas lines running to the house. Everything's electric. The generator out back hasn't been used in months. Our garage is basically a storage unit now. No cars running in there, nothing. We actually went through the whole maybe it's mold scare less than 6 months ago because my kid and I kept feeling run down and gross all the time. We had the place checked. Came back clear. And Evan's a licensed electrician who inspects buildings and signs off on them being up to code. So he's super strict about stuff like carbon monoxide and smoke detectors. He's always checking them and making sure they're working. So we went down that list. Detectors, mold, gas lines, everything. It really doesn't look like that's what's going on, but I'm still keeping it in the back of my mind and staying alert, just in case. Okay, now for the part that's got me genuinely freaked out. A few hours ago, Evan came home from work. It was earlier than he usually gets in, but he'd told me it was a training day, so I wasn't surprised. Nothing about it felt weird at all. He comes through the door, calls out, "Hey, Em," walks over, gives me a quick kiss, asks how my day's going. I ask how his training went. Totally normal back and forth, the same everyday kind of comfort you don't even think about. Then he says he's going to change, so he heads to the bathroom for a minute, like he always does. After that, he wanders into the living room and says something like, "I'm gonna try that new Elden Ring build people keep talking about." He grabs his controller, plops down in his beanbag, starts messing with the console. Very ordinary, very him. I wander off into the other room and start scrolling on my phone. Social media, nothing interesting. I'm just zoning out. After a while, I realize the house is really quiet. Like, too quiet for someone supposedly playing a video game. So I call out, "Babe?" Nothing. So I try again, louder this time. "Babe?" Still no answer. At this point I'm thinking, okay, maybe he passed out in his beanbag. Wouldn't be the first time. So I walk into the living room. And he's not there. Beanbag is empty. TV is off. Controller's on the table. Now I'm confused, but I'm not panicking yet. I check the kitchen. Not there. Our bedroom. Not there. Bathroom. Empty. I do a lap through the house. Kids' room, Office, guest room, nothing. I think, okay, maybe he stepped into the garage or backyard without saying anything, which would be weird for him, but still possible. I check the backyard. No Evan. Garage? Just boxes and junk. No husband. I even walk around to the side yard and then to the front door. And that's when I see it. His work van is gone. That's when my stomach drops. Because this man does not leave the house without at least calling out, "Love you, see you later," and giving me a kiss. Not once in all these years. Not his style at all. So now I'm like, did he really just walk out without saying goodbye? That alone is enough to make me feel off. I grab my phone and call him. It goes straight to voicemail. Before I can even spiral, he texts me. "Hey, everything okay? Am I okay? Babe, where did you go?" He replies, "I can't talk right now. I'm still in CPR training. What's going on?" I'm just frozen. CPR training. So I tell him, "What are you talking about? You came home early. We talked. You changed. You were in the living room playing your game and then you just disappeared." He sends back, "Em, I haven't left work yet. I kissed you goodbye this morning. I've been here all day. My badge never even left the building, and the door camera didn't ping once." At this point, I'm actually pacing. I'm 45 years old. I have never hallucinated in my life. I don't drink. I don't do drugs. I wasn't sleep deprived. I wasn't sick. I remember the weight of his hug, the way his shirt felt, the tone of his voice when he asked about my day, the sound of the bathroom door, the way he joked about his game. So I tell him, "I had a whole conversation with you. You hugged me. You went to the bathroom. I heard you. What do you mean you haven't been home?" He's confused and a little freaked out too, and he says, "Then it wasn't me." And no alerts went off on the ring. No door, no motion, nothing. That's when a different fear creeps in. Not the carbon monoxide kind. The other kind. The "we've been through this before" kind. Because here's the thing. When we first moved into this house, we had something. We used to joke about it, call it a house guest. We even gave it a name, Rowan, because at first it was just harmless little pranks. Lights flickering, keys showing up in random places, doors we knew we closed being slightly open. We brushed it off as old house quirks and our own forgetfulness. Until it escalated. It started with me feeling touches in my sleep. At first it was just like someone lightly tapping my leg or brushing my hair. I told myself it was dreams or the blanket shifting. Then one night, something grabbed my ankle and yanked hard enough to pull my foot out from under the covers. That was the night I sat up in bed, heart racing, and thought, okay, no, that wasn't a dream. I was scared enough that I actually looked up local paranormal groups because I didn't know what else to do. Evan, being the practical, grounded one, kind of shrugged it off. He said it was probably just my imagination, or a sleep thing. He didn't fully believe it, until it happened to him. One night, I'm half asleep and I hear him swear under his breath and jolt upright. Later he tells me, something grabbed my foot, like full-on grabbed it and yanked it. And this is a man who does not spook easily. He was pale. That was when both of us stopped laughing it off. Fast forward a bit. Last year in February, our house got chosen for a renovation show. Full-on makeover, new walls, new layout, new everything. While we were staying elsewhere, the production team arranged for a chaplain to come and bless the house before the big reveal. We never mentioned Rowan. We didn't say a word about any of it. After the renovations were done and we moved back in, everything was quiet. No footsteps. No flickering that couldn't be explained. No more touches in the middle of the night. It's been about 16 months of peace. To be totally honest, there were moments I almost missed the playful version of whatever that was. But mostly, we were incredibly grateful it all just stopped. And then today happened. And then, without a door opening, without a camera alert, without a sound, it was gone. Along with his van that, apparently, never left his work parking lot. So now I'm sitting here, going through every possibility in my head. Did my brain glitch? Was it some kind of stress episode? But then why did it feel so physically real? Why could I describe the smell of his cologne, the feel of his hoodie? Was it something pretending to be him? I don't know. I honestly don't know. I just know that it didn't feel like a fuzzy dream that faded when I woke up. It felt like real life, like any other afternoon I've spent with him. And then I checked my phone, and reality didn't line up with what I had just experienced. So that's where I'm at right now, caught between the logical explanations we've already ruled out and the weirdness I really truly thought was behind us. I'm staying alert. I'm double-checking the practical stuff, because I'm not about to ignore something that could be dangerous. But I'm also sitting with this really unsettling thought. Whatever showed up today knew exactly how to be my husband, and I have no idea why. Okay, so let me take you back for a second. I was in about 8th grade, and I'd been invited to this big birthday sleepover at my friend Hannah's house. Hannah and I both grew up in Christian homes, but our situations were pretty different. My house always felt peaceful, you know? Like even when things were stressful, there was this sense of safety. Hannah's place didn't feel like that. Her mom and her stepdad, well, technically her mom's boyfriend, Mark, were constantly fighting by then, and everyone kind of knew they were headed toward breaking up. There was just this heaviness in the house, even when they were being polite. Looking back now, I don't think it was a very safe, spiritual environment for her at all. Anyway, that night it was a classic slumber party. Snacks everywhere, cheesy movies on TV, somebody painted somebody else's nails bright blue, all of that. And of course, we got to the part of the night where someone goes, "We should play creepy games." So we did the usual ones. Bloody Mary in the bathroom mirror, light as a feather, stiff as a board in the living room. Someone tried to teach us how to use a homemade pendulum with a necklace over a piece of paper. Just middle school nonsense, you know? I was pretty naive about that stuff. I honestly didn't realize those games were supposed to be connected to anything spiritual or supernatural. If I'd understood that, I wouldn't have touched them. I had been taught really clearly not to mess with that kind of thing. So there we are, all piled into this big den, maybe 5 or 6 of us. The room was long, like maybe 15 by 20 feet. We were all clustered on one side of the room in front of the TV, blankets and pillows everywhere, a lamp on in the far corner, some random knickknacks on shelves. We had just finished another round of light as a feather, stiff as a board. And as usual, it worked. One girl, Maya, is like, "See? It works because it's supernatural." And that starts this whole debate. Most of us were like, "No, it's not. It's just physics." I remember literally saying something like, "Guys, if you shine a flashlight under your chin in the dark and stare into a mirror, of course you look creepy. That's the point. It doesn't mean there's a monster watching you." I was so matter-of-fact about it. And with the lifting game, I'm going, we have, 6 people lifting one girl? If she weighs like 90 pounds, that's 15 pounds each. That's not magic, that's math. I was fully team skeptic on the mechanics of it, even though I personally believed the supernatural was real. I just didn't think those things were it. I think the group broke down something like this. 4 or 5 of us thought it was totally natural and just fun party tricks. One girl was on the fence, and one girl, her name was Jenna, absolutely believed it was spiritual. So we're all talking over each other, kind of half laughing, half arguing, when Jenna suddenly goes, in this dramatic voice, "If there are any spirits here, show yourself." And my whole soul just went, oh no. You know that feeling when your stomach drops and you feel like you can't quite breathe right? That was me. I knew that was a terrible idea, but she said it so fast and so out of nowhere that I didn't have time to stop her. And we got an answer immediately. Remember, we're sitting on one side of the room. On the opposite wall, there's this small table with a heavy ceramic lamp on it, like the kind your grandma might have. The TV's in front of us, the lamp's way across from us. None of us are over there. We all go quiet at the same time. No one said, "Did you hear that?" or anything. We just knew something shifted. Not tip, not wobble. It slid. Slowly. Intentionally. Sideways. At least a foot across the surface of the table. You could hear the scrape of it against the wood. And then it went right over the edge and crashed onto the carpet. The lamp did not move toward us, so nobody could have been pulling a string from where we were. None of us had stood up. Nobody screamed until after it hit the ground. The only other people in the house were Hannah's mom and Mark, and we hadn't seen them for hours. It had to be around 1, maybe 2 in the morning at that point. The house was quiet except for us. The room just froze. I remember feeling this cold, heavy weight settle in my chest. Part of me wanted to jump up and run outside, and the other part of me couldn't make my legs move. Finally, one girl, braver than the rest of us, stood up and walked across the room to check the lamp. The rest of us sort of half-crawled, half-shuffled behind her, clinging to each other like ducklings. We were all desperate to find something normal. We checked under the table, around the base, on top. We looked for fishing line, string, a loose cord, anything. Nothing. The cord wasn't even stretched tight. It was just lying there. There was no way the plug would have been strong enough to drag that thing a whole foot across the table. And remember, this group was full of skeptics. A lot of us had older brothers who lived to torment us with elaborate pranks, so somebody set this up was absolutely our first thought. But Hannah was an only child. None of our brothers were there. Nobody had come in or out of that room. And the whole conversation that led up to Jenna calling out like that had just kind of spiraled there. No planning. No time to rig anything, even if someone had wanted to. Plus, Hannah was shaking. She kept saying, "I swear I didn't do anything. I didn't set this up. This isn't funny." And we believed her. You could see it in her face. She was done. We'd played those spooky games at other sleepovers before and never thought twice about them. The funny thing is, most of us never realized people actually took them as spiritual until that night. The one girl who did think they were supernatural just assumed everyone else knew that too. I wish I could tell you I figured out a clever, natural explanation later. I really do. I replayed that moment in my head so many times. Who was sitting where the cords were, whether maybe someone bumped the table and I just didn't notice. I still don't have an answer. What I do know is this: inviting something, anything, to show itself is not a game. That night burned that lesson into me. It's like that saying, you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. Don't throw open your doors like that, spiritually speaking, and then act surprised when something walks through. After the lamp fell, we weren't arguing anymore. Nobody wanted to keep debating whether our little party tricks were natural or supernatural. We were done. Someone quietly flipped on another light. We picked up the lamp, set it carefully back on the table, and kind of just sat there. The mood was gone. All the silly, giggly slumber party energy had evaporated. We decided we weren't playing any more games. We rolled out our sleeping bags, left the lights on, all of them, and tried to go to sleep. And every little creak and house noise that night, yeah, we heard all of it. To this day, I still think back to that moment as the night I learned not to go looking for things I didn't actually want to find. So, thank you for listening. This is one of those stories that still makes my body react like it's happening all over again, even though it's been decades. I'm going to talk to you like I'd talk to a close friend over coffee. But just know, inside, I'm still shaking a little. I grew up in a Christian home, but it wasn't the safe, cozy picture people sometimes imagine. My mom was the main source of the emotional abuse, sometimes physical too. My extended family had their own patterns of cruelty, and it all felt very generational, like this heavy script being passed down. My dad, let's call him David, was my spiritual rock. He loved God, he prayed, he tried. But he also enabled a lot of what was happening by not stopping it. So even my safe person was complicated. That's the backdrop to everything I'm about to tell you. I've had a few supernatural experiences in my life, but nothing like this one. Even now, when I think about it, I get that deep, animal-level fear. My heart speeds up, my body wants to run, and I feel physically unsafe just remembering. I'll do my best to put it into words, but part of what makes it so horrifying is that it almost refuses to fit into language. When I was a kid, about 10, maybe 11, I went to this church camp in the woods for a few days. It was late fall in the hills, cold enough that we needed the heaters on in the cabins, but not snowing or anything dramatic like that. There was a rumor going around camp that there was a ghost of an old groundskeeper haunting the place. Supposedly, he wandered near one of the older cabins at night. I knew it was nonsense. The haunted cabin everyone pointed to was where the counselors slept, and the camp itself wasn't even that old. I didn't believe in ghosts then, and I don't really now, at least not in the typical TV way. I'm a very rational, logical person by nature. I like science, and if something weird happens, my first instinct is to look for a natural explanation. I've never been into ghost hunting shows, mediums, any of that. Honestly, that stuff makes me deeply uncomfortable, like people are poking at things they don't understand. Anyway, that trip ended up being the last time I ever went to that camp. I refused to go back afterward. Our cabin had maybe 10 girls and a young adult counselor. I had a top bunk. The bunks were arranged in kind of a loose L shape around the room. My bed was against a wall, with this long, narrow window just to my left, up near the ceiling, higher than the tops of the other bunks. Outside, there was one of those tall security lights, and all night it cast this pale, steady beam through that skinny window. The cabin lights were off, of course, but that outside light made it so the room was never completely dark. Now, remember, it was chilly in there. The heaters kept it from freezing, but it wasn't exactly cozy. Sometime in the middle of the night, on my birthday actually, I snapped awake and sat straight up in my sleeping bag. No sleep paralysis, no half-dream state, just awake. And I was so hot. I was drenched in sweat, absolutely soaked inside my sleeping bag. I've had night sweats before and since, but this was like someone had poured warm water over me. My heart was pounding. My skin felt like it was burning from the inside out. And then I realized I wasn't reacting to a nightmare. I was reacting to something I was looking at. At first I thought, oh, it's just an adult checking on us. That would have made sense. The hallway was darker, and the shape I saw was darker still. So at first I tried to file it under grown-up making rounds. But then it stepped into the part of the room where that outside light was shining in from the window, and the light didn't touch it. I'm not just saying it was a dark figure in a bright room. I mean the light hit it and vanished. There was no outline, no reflection, no change in texture. It was like the light went in and never came back out. That's when my confusion shifted into something like, oh, this is wrong. This is not a person. As a kid, trying to describe what I saw, the image that came to mind was a cookie cutter. Like someone had taken a cookie cutter in the rough outline of an old person, bent shoulders, head, body, and pressed it into reality itself. Except instead of dough, they'd cut the shape out of the universe, not added something, removed something. It was the color of absence. That's the only way I can say it. People sometimes talk about shadow people, but shadows still obey light. This didn't. This was a presence made of nothing. It was black, but not any black I've ever seen. More like a hole, an absence, a moving cutout of wrongness. Every instinct in my body said, this should not be here. This should not exist. It was shaped vaguely like an old person, but it was pretending badly, like a child's drawing of a human being, just enough to suggest the rumor, like it was trying to wear the camp's ghost story as a costume. And as I stared at it, I knew two things with absolute clarity. First, I knew I was looking at a demon. I didn't reason my way to that. It was just this instant, wordless knowing. Whatever it really was, in some technical sense, that's what every part of me understood it to be. And I could feel, almost like heat on my skin, how much it hated me. It's hard to convey that part. Hatred like that doesn't feel like anger. It feels ancient, personal, like it already knew my whole family's pain and wanted more. Second, I knew I was completely safe. That sounds contradictory, but both things were somehow true at once. As terrified as I was, there was this other feeling wrapped around me, deep and solid. The best way I can describe it is this. Imagine you're a little kid, and your dad is holding you while you look at a tiger on the other side of thick glass. The tiger is real. It's dangerous. It would absolutely kill you if it could, but you know it can't touch you. That's how it felt, except way more intense. In that moment, I knew God was with me. Not as an idea, but as a presence as real as that thing in front of me. Only bigger, stronger, and utterly unafraid. So there I was, boiling in my own sweat, staring at this cutout of emptiness that hated me, and at the exact same time wrapped in this unshakable certainty. It cannot touch you. You are mine. You are safe. And then I passed out. I actually remember the sound of my body hitting the mattress, that dull thump as I fell back. Then nothing. I woke up the next morning like it was any other day at camp. The light came in through the window. Girls were getting dressed, talking, laughing. For a second, I wondered if I'd dreamed it, but my body knew better. I could feel it in my muscles, in the way my chest tightened when I glanced toward that hallway. I wanted to ask, did anyone see anything? Did anyone wake up last night? I didn't. I was too afraid they would laugh or tell me it was just a bad dream, or worse, that they would somehow blame me, say I must be so sinful that I attracted something evil. That kind of thinking wasn't unusual in the world I grew up in. It was the last day of camp, thank God. I didn't have to sleep in that bunk again, and I absolutely refused to ever go back there. I never did. For a couple of years afterward, when I thought about it, the main thing I remembered wasn't the horror. It was that feeling of God's presence, how overwhelmingly safe I'd felt in that moment. It was like my brain focused on that part, maybe as a mercy. Then I hit around 13 or 14, and it shifted. It was like the emotional filter wore off. The memory of that thing became sharper, more vivid, and the horror of its wrongness hit me full force. I think, in a way, God gave me a buffer when I was younger so I wouldn't break under it. Interestingly, I was never afraid of seeing it in my dad's house. I just knew it couldn't come in there. For all his flaws, my dad's home felt spiritually guarded, like there was a line it wasn't allowed to cross. Over the years, I've tried to explain it away to myself. Maybe it was some kind of fever, or a hallucination, or sleep paralysis without the paralysis. I've had plenty of nightmares and weird dreams. But this doesn't sit in the same category. It's the only thing in my life that still triggers that PTSD-type response, even decades later. I've had other supernatural experiences too, ones I didn't ask for and didn't enjoy, but nothing has ever matched that night. Fast forward many years. I'm married now, let's call my husband Daniel, and we have kids. One evening, when my oldest son, we'll call him Eli, was about 4, he was playing in the living room with his favorite little hat on. Out of nowhere, he froze, went pale, and started crying. I rushed over and asked what was wrong. Through his tears, he said, "The black shadow man took my hat off." That was all he could really explain at that age, a black shadow man. But the look on his face, this deep, cold terror that didn't match a normal childhood scare, hit me like a freight train. I knew, in that deep, wordless way, that he had seen something like what I had seen. And this time, something in me snapped in a different direction. Not fear, anger. I felt violated, furious. How dare it come into my house and scare my child? Generations of abuse and spiritual mess in both my family and Daniel's, and now this thing wanted to keep playing with us like we were toys. I stood there in my living room, shaking, and I told it, out loud and with every ounce of authority I had in Jesus' name, to leave and never come back. I meant it. I wasn't polite. I was spitting mad. And it left. Eli calmed down. He never saw it again. None of my younger kids have ever experienced anything like that. I don't fully understand the mechanics of any of this, but I'm doing everything I can to break the cycle of abuse and whatever spiritual junk has been attached to it. Once, I met a pastor, let's call him Pastor Ben, who shared that he had seen a demon once. He described it in more traditional, demonic terms, but when he talked about it, his voice went hoarse and his eyes had this haunted, distant look. And I recognized that look. He talked about that same, "it shouldn't exist" feeling, and I thought, you've seen it too. Maybe not the same shape, but the same kind of wrong. I didn't tell him my story. I've only ever told Daniel and one of my brothers, Luke. I don't think either of them really knows what to do with it. It's hard to talk about without breaking down, and crying in front of people over something this strange can feel humiliating, because it is terrifying to live with the knowledge, at least from my experience, that there are ancient, malevolent, invisible things out there, and that if they could, they would absolutely destroy us. I can't prove any of this to you. I don't expect everyone to believe me, but you asked for the story, and this is how it happened to me, as honestly as I can tell it. What I hold on to, more than the terror, is that other certainty from that night, that I was not alone, and that I was protected, that whatever darkness exists, it's not the strongest thing in the room. And now, as an adult, I fight back by loving my kids well, by refusing to perpetuate abuse, by drawing hard lines in my home, both practical and spiritual. Maybe that's one of the ways the cycle really breaks. So, yeah. That's the night something cut itself out of the dark and walked toward my bed. And the night I learned that even in the absolute worst wrongness, there was a presence that would not let me go. So, yesterday was my 30th birthday, and honestly, it was rough. By the time the night rolled around, the kids were finally tucked into bed. My daughter, Lila, and my little boy, Jame. The house was quiet in that way it only is when you know everyone's actually asleep. My partner, Marco, and I flopped down on the couch to watch some mindless TV. He didn't last long. Within 10 minutes, he was out cold, head tilted back, mouth slightly open, remote slipping from his hand. I remember looking at him and thinking, of course, even tonight, I'm alone with my thoughts. As the episode went on, the whole day just settled on me. Every little disappointment, every, "oh, we'll celebrate properly later," every forgotten text, every half-hearted happy birthday that felt more like an obligation than love. It all just stacked up inside my chest. And then it cracked. I started crying. Not the cute, single-tear movie kind. I mean full-on, ugly crying. The kind where your chest hurts, and you're trying not to be loud because you don't want to wake anyone, but you can't really stop once it starts. The only light in the house was coming from the TV. From where I was sitting on the couch, I could see straight into the dining room. It's open concept, with this little overhang from the ceiling and a narrow shelf where I keep a few family photos. Beyond that, through the doorway, I could see into the kitchen and just barely make out the back door. Last week, when Lila finished her first week back at school, I bought her 3 helium balloons as a little "you did it" surprise. By last night, they were half deflated and kind of just existing in random spots around the house. One was on the floor to my left, one was caught between the blades of the dining room ceiling fan. The fan was off, and another was sort of leaning against one of the dining chairs, right near the kitchen doorway. I'd been crying so hard my eyes were blurry, but I thought I saw this tiny flash of light in the dining room. For a second, I figured it was just the TV reflecting off something, one of the kids' toys, maybe a picture frame. But then I noticed the balloon near the kitchen doorway. The string was moving. At first I thought, okay, maybe the air conditioner kicked on weirdly because we have central air and it was running. But none of the other balloons were moving, not even their strings, just that one. I stared at it, and the longer I watched, the more I realized the balloon string wasn't just swaying, it was gliding. The balloon started to move across the floor, slowly, deliberately, not bobbing around like it was caught in some draft, but almost like someone had a hold of the string and was gently pulling it. It came closer and closer. My heart was pounding, but a part of me was still trying to rationalize it. It'll stop at the little drop between the dining room and living room, I thought. That tiny lip where the ceiling lowers and the shelf with the photos sticks out. It makes a kind of boundary between the rooms. The balloon did pause there, right at that point, as if it had bumped into something. For a second I thought, see, there you go, it's done. But then, so slowly I could track every inch, the balloon started to lower itself. The top of it gently tapped against the underside of that little shelf, almost like it was figuring out how to get through. And then, inch by inch, it slipped into the living room. The balloon kept gliding toward me, right across the room. No wobbling, no weird zigzags, just a soft, straight line in my direction. It stopped when it was directly in front of me, hovering between me and the TV. And then it shifted slightly to the left. The string brushed against my left hand. I actually gasped. I didn't move my hand. I didn't move anything. I just stared. The balloon floated back to center again, paused, and then shifted to the left one more time. This time the string lifted up and tapped my hand again, a little firmer, like a nudge. It felt intentional. I don't know how else to describe it. It didn't feel random. It didn't feel like air currents or physics or whatever explanation my brain usually runs to when something weird happens. It felt like someone was going, hey, I'm here. Look at me. The only thing I could think to do was reach out and grab the string. So I did. I wrapped my fingers around it and just held on. My hand was shaking. I don't even know if I was breathing at that point. I kept glancing over at Marco, still slumped on the couch, completely oblivious. I tried nudging him with my elbow. Nothing. I tugged his arm. Nothing. Finally, I kind of half-whispered, half-hissed his name until he startled awake. He blinked at me, confused, and said, "Why are you holding a balloon?" I was still clutching the string like it was a lifeline. I told him what happened. The flash, the balloon moving across the rooms, the way it tapped my hand. I was talking fast, probably not making sense, still on the edge of laughing or crying or both. He just stared at me for a second, and then he said, "Man, I wish I'd been awake. I bet you looked so freaked out." And that was it. No big reaction, no, "Oh my God," just that. I kind of wanted to smack him with the balloon if I'm being honest. Later, after he drifted back to sleep and the house got quiet again, I sat there holding that balloon and replaying everything in my head. The awful day, the loneliness, the way I'd been sitting there thinking, does anyone actually care that it's my birthday? And then that balloon, one that had been sitting in another room for days, somehow made its way to me, stopping right at my hand, twice. Look, maybe there's some totally normal explanation. Maybe I'll wake up tomorrow and talk myself out of it. But sitting there in the dark, with my cheeks still damp from crying and my fingers wrapped around that string, it didn't feel like a draft or an accident. It felt like someone or something on the other side saw how much that day hurt and wanted to make sure I got at least one birthday balloon anyway. Okay, let me take you back for a second. I was in middle school, maybe 12 or 13, when this all really started. A friend of mine, Maya, invited me over to her place after school. You know how it is at that age. Any excuse to hang out away from parents and homework sounds amazing. We get to her house and she introduces me to her older brother, Leo. Super chill guy, a little quiet. Kind of had that seen some stuff vibe, even back then. They're walking me around the house, showing me the living room, the kitchen, the backyard. Normal tour, right? Then Maya goes, totally casual, "Oh, by the way, our house is haunted. Just a heads up." I laugh, because of course I do. And then Leo chimes in, like he's just confirming the weather. Yeah, his name's Adrian. Like, they knew the ghost's name. They said it the way you'd talk about a weird neighbor. They tell me a couple of quick stories, but honestly, I didn't really buy it. I went home that night thinking, cute family ghost bit, very on brand for them. And that was that. Nothing happened that day. The second time I went over, though, that's when it got real. We were hanging out in this back room they had. It kind of doubled as a game room and storage. The walls were lined with these tall, old mirrors. There were a few people there that time. Me, Maya, Leo, and a handful of our other friends. We were just in little clusters, chatting about school, music, crushes, dumb stuff. At some point, I kind of spaced out and glanced at one of the mirrors across the room. And I see someone staring straight at me. At first, I think it's just one of the guys standing behind me, so I kind of shift, expecting the reflection to move. But it doesn't. Everyone in the room is moving, talking, laughing, and this one figure in the mirror is perfectly still, locked on me. That's when my brain does that little click of, oh, that's not right. I focus and I realize I'm not looking at a normal face. It's like there is a person-shaped figure, but the face is just wrong. It's like it's been torn away or erased, replaced with raw, bloody skin and these bloodshot eyes staring into me, like I'm the only thing it can see. And my body just goes cold. I sort of jerk back and whisper, "What the?" probably louder than I thought because suddenly everyone notices something's off. I shuffle over to Leo, trying not to completely lose it, and I tell him what I saw. He gives me this look that's half, I'm not surprised, and half, yep, that tracks. And he just says, "Oh, you saw Adrian." I remember just going, "Excuse me? What?" in my head. My friends crowd around, asking what happened, why I freaked out, and I'm trying to explain it while my heart is in my throat. And they're all a little scared too, because even if you don't see it yourself, you can feel when someone's not faking that kind of fear. Later, when things calm down a bit, Leo opens up more. He tells me that he's been dealing with this spirit for a while. It wasn't just random sightings. Sometimes they'd straight up fight. He talks about waking up paralyzed, having nightmares, feeling this presence try to push him around. And then he tells me he'd learned ways to protect himself. Spiritual stuff, shielding, visualization, calling in protection. And something about that just hooks me. I'd always been curious about the other side, but hearing it from someone my age, someone who had that steady, matter-of-fact tone, it lit something up in me. That was kind of the start of my own spiritual deep dive. Fast forward a couple of years. Around that time, I run into Leo again at school. We end up talking in the hallway, and I ask him, kind of casually, "Hey, how's the whole Adrian situation?" He sighs and tells me, "It's better sometimes, but he still shows up. He still messes with me." And I don't know what came over me, but I just said, "Okay, then let's get rid of him." We sit down and basically brainstorm like we're working on a group project. Not for math, but for banishing a ghost. I share some of the techniques I'd been practicing, and we come up with this idea. I'd use a focused visualization to not only confront Adrian, but to move him, like relocate him to a place where he can't find his way back. Another realm, another plane, however you want to word it. So I go home and I spend a whole week meditating specifically on this. Not just calming my mind, but building up energy, intention, and clarity about what I want to do. Every session is like training for a fight I know is coming. After that week, I decide, tonight's the night. I go to bed, but I don't actually go to sleep. I lay down, close my eyes, and drop into meditation. About 3 hours of deep focus. I bring up every bit of energy I'd been saving, every tool I'd learned. In my mind, I visualize Adrian clearly. I visualize surrounding him in light, pulling him out of that house, and sending him far away, into a realm where he can't track the way back, where he's contained, not tortured, but gone from here. When I feel it's complete, I just let myself drift off and fall asleep. The next morning, I find Leo and ask him, "Hey, how's the house feel?" He kind of frowns and says, "Different. I don't know how to explain it yet. I'll let you know." A week passes. Then he comes back to me and says, "It's weird, but I think he's gone. The house feels light, quiet, peaceful." I go over a little while after that, and I can feel it too. The place that used to have this heavy, watched feeling now feels normal, safe even. We talk about it years later, and the story is the same. No escalations, no creepy encounters, no more battles. As far as we can tell, the house is clear. So we kind of close that chapter. Years go by, 10, maybe more. I've moved, grown up, lived a whole life since then. Adrian is more of a story I tell than anything I actively think about. One night, I remember it really clearly. It's around 2 or 3 in the morning. I'm at this 24-hour diner with one of the friends who'd been there in that mirrored room all those years ago, and with my girlfriend at the time. Let's call him Jared. We're all exhausted, eating pancakes and fries at some ridiculous hour, the way you do after a long night. The conversation drifts, and I start telling Jared the whole story from the beginning. The house, the mirrors, Adrian, the meditation, the banishing. He remembers me freaking out back then, remembers the vibe in the room, but he says he never saw the spirit himself. He tells me, "I didn't see what you saw, man, but watching you lose color in your face like that still gives me goosebumps." He listens to the whole saga, including the part about cleansing the house and how it stayed peaceful. He's skeptical, but in a friendly way. More like, wild if true, you know? And that's fine. It's a ghost story. People will believe what they believe. We finish eating, pay the bill, and head home. Around 4 a.m., my girlfriend and I crawl into bed. The TV is on at the foot of the bed, kind of humming in the background. Closet is to my left, bedroom door to my right. She's curled up beside me. It's one of those moments where everything feels normal, cozy, quiet. I eventually drift off. The first thing I notice is this sense of alarm. Not anxiety, like actual alarms. It's like invisible sirens are going off. I can hear something like warning bells, and there's this low, dangerous growling, like a big dog is somewhere just out of sight. I turn toward the closet, and that's where he comes in. This black silhouette, humanoid, dense, heavy, pushes its way out of my closet and rushes straight at me. There's no build-up, no slow horror movie reveal. 1 second he's there, the next he's on top of me, pinning me down while I'm lying on my back. I can't move. One of his hands clamps over my mouth. The other crushes down on my groin, and I feel it. Real, sharp pain that shoots through my body. Not dream pain, not imaginary. It's like someone kneed me there as hard as they could. We're face to face, and even though his body looks like a shadow, the face is suddenly clear. That same awful, torn, bloody skin, and the red, furious eyes from the mirror all those years ago. And the look he gives me says everything. I found you. I'm back. You didn't get rid of me. For a split second, I feel that old fear. But then all the training kicks in. I shove my focus inward and push out this surge of white light. A shield, a bubble, whatever you want to call it. I throw it up around me with everything I've got. There's this tug-of-war feeling, like he's trying to claw his way through it, still pressing down on me, still fighting. It feels like it goes on forever, but if I had to guess, maybe a minute. A very long minute. And then, suddenly, something shifts. I feel another presence behind him. I don't see it clearly. It's more like a knowing, but I feel hands grab him from behind. The pressure on my chest, my mouth, my body eases up as he's yanked backward, away from me, back toward the closet. They drag him away, and he's pulled back through the closet, gone. And then I slam back into my body. I wake up in my bed, gasping. The first thing I feel is the pain in my groin, like I'd just been kicked there. My whole body is buzzing, like every cell is vibrating, and I'm covered in goosebumps from head to toe. The TV is still on. My girlfriend is still asleep next to me. The room is the same, but I'm not the same. It takes me about 10 minutes to steady my breathing, to stop shaking. And here's the weird thing. I'm not exactly scared. I'm shocked. Stunned. It's like my brain is going, did that really just happen? Over and over. After a while, the vibration calms down. The pain fades. I say a quiet little prayer or intention for protection, thank whatever pulled him off me, and eventually, I just roll over and go back to sleep. To this day, I haven't seen Adrian again. Maybe that was his way of saying, you didn't erase me, I just moved. Maybe it was some kind of unfinished business between us. I don't have every answer. But I do know this: that whole journey, from the mirrors in that back room, to the years of meditation, to that astral fight in my bedroom, changed how I see the world. It made the spiritual realm feel less like a concept and more like a place I'd actually been. And whether you believe every part of it or not, I can tell you this much, speaking to you right now: it felt real. It still does. So, for as long as I can remember, weird stuff has just kind of followed me around. When I was little, it wasn't the TV that turned itself on at night. It was this old radio in my room. I'd wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning to some scratchy music or people talking. The knob turned all the way up, and I'd be too scared to get out of bed to shut it off. And then there were the imaginary friends. Only they weren't very imaginary, because my older brother Jonah saw them too. We described the same figures, the same clothes, the same way they'd stand in the doorway. After a while, it got to the point where strange things were just normal. Annoying sometimes, but familiar. In this house, the one I live in now, there's one presence that's been around as long as I can remember. Out of everything that's drifted in and out of here, this one has stayed. For simplicity's sake, I call him the Old Man. My little brother prefers to call him Mr. Ellis, like he's some grumpy neighbor who never moved out. Either way, we're pretty sure he lives in the downstairs area. He mostly hangs around the lower level of the house, near the den and the little guest room down there. You can hear him walking around, a slow, steady shuffle, like someone wearing heavy slippers. The floor creaks in certain spots, and you get used to recognizing the pattern. Step, step, step. He's never actually spoken to me, not directly, but he clearly has opinions about certain people. When my mom's best friend, Carla, stayed with us for a while, things got tense. She'd do laundry in the small bathroom where we keep the washer and dryer, and almost every time she was in there alone, something would start banging on the pipes in the wall. Hard. She swore up and down that she heard a man's voice once, right behind her ear, telling her, "Get out." Not yelling, just low and sharp, like a warning. Nobody else in the family has ever heard him say that. The worst we usually get is our names whispered from the hallway or from the bottom of the stairs. And honestly, half the time I'm not even sure it's him. This house is like a paranormal group project. Too many participants, not enough roll call. Personally, I don't think the Old Man is bad. If anything, he's been weirdly considerate with us. When I used to sleep in that guest room off the downstairs den, I'd come home from school to an empty house almost every day. I'd throw my backpack on the floor, flop on the bed for 5 minutes, and immediately pass out for 2 hours. I was a mess about sleep, staying up too late, getting up too early, living on naps. Sometimes I'd be so tired I wouldn't even bother turning off the overhead light. I'd just crash with it blazing in my face. But here's the strange part. If I fell asleep with the light on, there was about a 90% chance I'd wake up later in the dark, covers pulled halfway up, room quiet, and the light switched off. At first, I thought it was my mom, but when I asked her, she just rolled her eyes and said, "If you're tired, go to bed earlier. I'm not your maid." She wasn't exactly the tuck you in and turn off the lights type. My dad swore he wasn't the one either. His attitude was always more like, "You'll learn when you're exhausted enough." By that point, both of my brothers were barely home. Work, friends, their own lives. And they've never been the type to sneak in just to quietly flip my light off and then deny it for years. If anything, they would have bragged about being sweet for once. So that left, well, him. It sounds silly, but in my head it became this unspoken ritual between us. I'd crash, he'd take care of the lights. That's what made the whole Carla situation confusing for me. Because if he's some kind of guardian, why was he so harsh with her? She's not a bad person. She's actually really kind, a little anxious, and definitely not someone who deserved to be scared out of a laundry room. And the thing is, she never actually saw him. She only heard the banging in that voice. So I can't even say with total confidence that it was the old man. It could have been something else entirely. This house has layers. Not everything here feels like him. Still, whenever I think about it, that's the part that sticks with me. The contrast. The gentle, almost fatherly act of turning my lights off so I sleep better. Versus the sharp, cold, get out someone threw at Carla while she folded towels. So where does that leave me with him? Honestly, I still don't know. Some nights, when I'm walking past the bottom of the stairs, and I hear those familiar slow footsteps in the den, I'll just say, "Hey, old man," under my breath. I never get an answer, but the house feels less empty after I do. I don't bother trying to convince myself it's all in my head anymore. I've had too many shared experiences, too many little patterns that don't line up with old pipes or the house settling. At some point, you just accept that not everyone you live with is technically alive. And I guess that's why I'm telling you this. Because I can't be the only one who's grown up like this, where the paranormal isn't some big dramatic horror movie event. It's just part of the background of your life. Like traffic outside your window, or the train that always passes at 3 a.m. So now I'm curious, how many of you have your own old man? Someone, or something, that's just quietly existed alongside you. Not quite friend, not quite stranger, but still, somehow, part of home. So, let me tell you about something that actually happened to me. It sounds made up, I know. If someone else told me this, I'd probably raise an eyebrow too. But I promised myself as a kid that I would never forget it and never doubt it. So here we are. I grew up in Portugal, and back then I barely knew a word of English. Maybe hello and okay, and that's being generous. Anyway, when I was a kid, my mom, her name's Carla, loved watching these medical reality shows. You know, the ones where people go through big surgeries and they show everything. We'd usually be in the living room after dinner, the TV on, lights a bit dim, me half playing, half watching beside her on the couch. On this particular day, there was an episode about a man getting some kind of stomach surgery. I remember they showed him lying on the operating table, all covered in those blue sheets except for the area they were working on. The doctor was explaining what they were going to do. At least that's what I assume now, because back then the captions were in English, and I technically didn't know English. The moment they started cutting, I panicked. I didn't want to see it. So I did the obvious thing. I turned my head away. But the image didn't go away. I thought, okay, weird. Maybe it's just a reflection or something. Maybe my glasses are doing something strange. I used glasses then, and still do, so that was my first idea. So I take off my glasses. Still seeing it. The exact same view as if I were looking straight at the TV. The cut, the instruments, the surgeons moving around. I think, fine, I just won't look at anything. I squeeze my eyes shut, really hard. Like really pressing them closed until it almost hurts. Still there. Same scene, clearer than any dream I've ever had. Now I'm starting to get scared. I shove my face into a pillow, pressing so hard I can barely breathe. I cover my ears with my hands, then with the pillow too, like I'm trying to smother the sound and the image at the same time. The living room fades behind me as I get up and walk out, but the surgery doesn't. I go to the hallway. Still there. Same angle, like I'm watching through an invisible TV in my head. And it's not just the video. I can hear it. The beeping of the machines, the soft murmur of the doctors, the awful wet sounds. Even when I cover my ears as hard as I can, the sound doesn't really get quieter. It's more like it's inside my head than outside. At this point, I'm a little kid trying every trick I can think of. No glasses, eyes shut, pillow, leaving the room, nothing works. And here's the part that really stuck with me. The images in my head would change, just like a normal TV show. Camera angle shifts, close-up, then wider shot, different parts of the surgery. And every time I got desperate enough, I'd peek back into the living room and look at the actual TV. It was the same. Exactly the same. Whatever angle I had seen in my head a second before, that's what was on the screen. And remember, I didn't speak English. But in my head, the captions at the bottom of the image were clear enough that I could follow what was happening. They made sense in some strange way, like I was understanding the meaning without really knowing how I was doing it. Completely normal, like it's just another evening show. I begged her, "Mai, please, can you turn it off? Please, I don't want to see it anymore." She kind of half laughed and said something like, "It's just a show, Miguel. Don't be so dramatic," and kept watching. So I'm stuck there with this movie in my head that I cannot switch off. Finally, after what felt like 10 full minutes of this, the surgery ends. In my head, it ends first. The scene changes, the doctors step back, they start showing the patient being moved or something like that. And when I open my eyes and look at the TV, there it is. Same moment, same scene. When it was all over, I wasn't crying or screaming or anything like that. I was just very, very quiet. Even as a kid, I knew something about that was off. Not like normal, I got scared of a TV show off, but I might not believe myself later off. So I did this really strange thing for a child. I made a promise to my future self. I remember thinking, very clearly, listen, one day you're going to grow up. You're going to tell yourself this was just your imagination, or that you remembered it wrong. Don't do that. Don't forget this. And don't call yourself a liar. So I promised I would never forget that day, and I would never doubt it really happened, exactly the way I remembered it. And now, looking back, it still feels just as bizarre. Like one of those stories people tell about ghosts or aliens, things you can't prove, things that sound ridiculous when you say them out loud. I get it if you don't believe me. Honestly, I wouldn't blame you. But that kid in the hallway, with his face buried in a pillow, fighting a TV that followed him around his own house, he made me promise. So I keep that promise. So, let me tell you about the house I grew up in. We had 2 bathrooms. Downstairs was the real bathroom. Big, bright, warm, with all the nice stuff in it. That's where everyone showered, did their makeup, all of that. And then there was the upstairs bathroom. Calling it a bathroom is generous. It was this tiny, smelly little room at the end of the hallway, right at the top of the stairs. The door stuck when you opened it. The floor was always weirdly cold, and the small window was covered with this warped, yellowing glass that made the daylight look sick. Even at noon in the summer, it felt like twilight in there. The light switch almost never worked. You'd flick it up and down, hear this faint buzzing, and nothing. If it did come on, it was this weak, flickery glow that made everything look worse. Most of the time, it was just dark. Dark and quiet and wrong. Nobody liked that bathroom. The women in the house flat out refused to use it. My older brother Daniel and I would only go in there if it was some kind of emergency, like, it's 4 in the morning and the downstairs is too far and I might not make it, kind of emergency. For me, when I was little, that bathroom was pure nightmare fuel. There were a few nights, like 2 or 3 in the morning, When I'd wake up and really have to go, and going downstairs alone, that felt impossible. The staircase creaked, the living room was a huge black void, and my kid brain had already decided there were monsters waiting under every piece of furniture down there. So the logical choice in my mind was the horrible little upstairs bathroom right next to my room. I remember standing in that doorway sometimes, not even crossing the threshold yet, just listening. It was so quiet it almost rang in my ears. No cars outside, no TV, no pipes, nothing. My heart would be pounding and I'd think, just hurry, just hurry, just hurry. I'd step inside in the dark, feel my way to the cold sink, the cold edge of the tub, the cold toilet seat. I'd keep my back toward the hallway because for some reason, that felt safer. But every single time, I'd get this feeling that something was behind me. Not like, oh, I feel a little nervous. I mean that full-body chill, hairs standing up, convinced that if I turned around I would see something I did not want to see. And there was this one image that just wouldn't leave me alone. My mom's bedroom was down the hallway, right across from the bathroom door. In my head, I'd picture her door, just slightly open. And around the edge of the door frame, I'd see hands. Dozens of them. Pale, thin hands, all pushing around that frame, fingers curling over the wood like they were trying to pull themselves through. They'd be reaching in, stretching out toward me. Every time I used that bathroom in the middle of the night, I felt like those hands were right behind me, creeping closer and closer. Not rushing, just slowly closing the gap, inch by inch. I never actually saw them, of course, but I felt them. I'd do my business as fast as humanly possible, and the second I was done, I would bolt. I mean full sprint out of that bathroom, down the hall, and straight into my mom's room. I'd dive into her bed, latch onto her like a koala, shaking and trying not to cry. She'd mumble, "You're okay, go to sleep," half asleep herself, and I'd lie there wide awake, convinced those hands were still out there in the hall, searching the dark for me. Fast forward a couple of decades. A few years ago, I was chatting with my sister, Nina, about that old house. We were just reminiscing, laughing about the terrible wallpaper, the noisy radiator, the way the front door never quite shut properly unless you slammed it. Then she goes, "Do you remember that gross little bathroom upstairs?" I laughed and said, "Oh my God, yes. That thing always smelled weird." Before I could say anything else, she goes, "I hated that bathroom. When I was a kid, I used to get so freaked out in there. I always imagined these hands, like dozens of hands, creeping around Mum's bedroom doorframe and reaching in to grab me. I'd freak out and run crying to her room." I just froze. I hadn't told her my version of that, ever. I hadn't told anyone. It was one of those childhood fears you assume is just your own overactive imagination, too silly to mention. So I kind of stared at her and said, "Wait, what did you just say?" She repeated it, laughing it off, like it was no big deal. Same hallway, same door, same hands, wrapping around the frame and reaching in. My stomach dropped. I remember this weird shiver running down my back. It wasn't even that I thought, "Oh, it must have been a ghost," or adding like that. It was more like, okay, what are the odds that we both imagined the exact same thing in the exact same place and never talked about it? After that, we started comparing notes about that house. Little things, strange moments, stuff we'd both kind of filed away as just me being weird when we were kids. The more we talked, the more we realized there were all these overlapping experiences we never shared with each other growing up. Odd noises, strange feelings, dreams that seemed to happen in the same parts of the house. That upstairs bathroom was just one piece of it. I still don't know what was going on there. Maybe it was just the way the house was laid out. Maybe the drafts and the bad lighting and the old pipes and that awful window all just combined to mess with our kid brains in the same way. Or maybe there was something about that little bathroom at the top of the stairs, and that doorway across from it that wasn't quite right. All I know is, to this day, if I get up at 3 a.m. and walk past a dark open doorway, there's still a tiny part of me that expects to see fingers curling slowly around the frame. And every time, I walk just a little bit faster. So, let me tell you about something that happened at my cabin the other night. I've got this little wooden place right at the edge of the forest. My actual house is maybe a 10-minute walk away, but the cabin itself is basically hugging the tree line. It's where I go to unwind. There's a small garden, a patch of grass, some tomatoes, herbs. It's my happy place. And my animals know it too. I've got 3 cats, and they usually follow me there like a little furry parade. That evening, I did a quick head count. 1, 2. I realized I was missing one, Luna, the curious one. I shrugged it off at first, figured she was lurking under the porch or stalking some imaginary bug. It was around 9:45 p.m., already fully dark. The only light was from a few bright lamps mounted on the cabin and a string of warm bulbs I've got along the fence. Just enough that I could see what I was doing while I watered the tomatoes. My girlfriend, Mira, was standing a few steps away, scrolling on her phone and chatting with me about something random, what we'd cook this weekend or some show we wanted to watch. I remember I was rolling a cigarette, kind of half listening, half focused on the little ritual of it. And then I heard it. A meow. Not a cute one, not the feed me kind. It sounded wrong, like a cat in pain. It came from just beyond the gate that separates the yard from the forest. You know when your brain just switches modes? That's what happened. I stopped what I was doing and looked toward the trees. I said, "Did you hear that?" And Mira frowned and said she thought it was Luna too. So I opened the gate and stepped into the forest. The second I passed through, it felt darker, like the light from the cabin just dropped off behind me. I took a few steps in, and then I heard the meow again, this time farther off and a bit quieter, like it had moved to my left. I called back over my shoulder that I was going to check it out. Mira stayed in the fenced area. She doesn't like walking in the woods at night as much as I do. The ground slopes downhill behind the cabin, so I started walking down the path. I know that forest like the back of my hand. I've been wandering around there since I was a kid, but that night it felt different. Heavy, like the air itself was paying attention. I kept calling, "Luna, Luna, where are you?" Then I heard it again. This third meow, man, it made my stomach drop. It sounded like a cat that had just been hurt badly, like that horrible choked noise an animal might make when it's dying. It came from somewhere down the hill in front of me, then cut off completely. Silence. No rustling, no snapping twigs, no retreating animal. Just nothing. My heart started racing, and I remember thinking, a fox got her, or a dog, or something. I picked up my pace and went deeper downhill. The farther I went, the more closed in everything felt. There were bushes all around me, branches brushing my shoulders. I turned in a slow circle, trying to figure out where that sound had come from. That's when I heard it. A very soft meow, right next to me. Like, right there, just off my left side. Only this time, the sound was wrong in a completely different way. It wasn't just weak like a hurt animal. It sounded off, almost like someone doing an impression of a cat, like a person trying to mimic a meow, but not quite getting it right. The second that sound hit my ears, every hair on my body stood up. I didn't even have time to think about what it meant. My body just reacted. Goosebumps, chills, this heavy feeling in my chest like my instincts were screaming at me. Something is not okay. And suddenly, no more meowing. At that point, It felt like the forest was holding its breath. I decided, okay, that's enough, and turned to head back uphill. While I was climbing, I kept calling out to Mira. I must have shouted her name 4 or 5 times, loud. And here's the thing about that forest. It's insanely acoustic. If you yell once, people in the village, almost a mile away, can sometimes hear you. It's like the sound bounces around perfectly. But she never answered. Not once. I made it back up to the top of the hill, breathing hard, and then I see her, Luna, calmly trotting toward me from the opposite direction, from near the cabin. Tail up, eyes bright, totally fine. She had never been down the hill at all. I just froze for a second, staring at her. That's when my brain really started stitching everything together. If Luna was up here the whole time, who, or what, had I followed down into the woods? I walked back through the gate, and Mira looked at me like, where the hell did you go? She told me she'd been calling my name over and over, getting worried because I wasn't answering. That freaked me out even more, because I hadn't heard a single thing from her. Not one word. Meanwhile, I'd been yelling for her too, and she swore she didn't hear me. So there we were, maybe 100 feet apart, in a forest where sound usually travels ridiculously well. And somehow, neither of us could hear the other at all. That silent pocket around me in the woods, that fake-sounding little meow right beside my ear, the fact that my cat, the one I thought I was saving, had never even been there. I've spent my whole life in forests. Night hikes, camping, hunting, just wandering around. I don't spook easily. I know what foxes sound like. I know what owls sound like. I know all the usual weird noises. But that night, that didn't feel like usual weird. Sometimes I sit and replay it in my head, and every time I hit that moment, the soft, human-ish meow right next to me, and the way my body reacted before my brain did, I get those same goosebumps all over again. Luna was fine. I was fine. Nothing actually happened, if you look at it that way. But still, something out there in those woods was meowing at me, and whatever it was, it wanted me to go deeper. Welcome to Paranormal M. Huge thanks to all of you for sending in your paranormal stories and for always supporting and listening to the channel. Keep those experiences coming. We love reading them. It's me again, all comfy and relaxed, ready to sit down and share these paranormal encounters to help you drift off to sleep. So go ahead, turn off the lights, snuggle under your blanket, and let's dive into tonight's stories. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the latest videos from the channel. So, before I tell you what happened that night, I need to give you a bit of context, otherwise it just sounds completely insane. At the time, it was early October 2021. I was living in this tiny ground floor apartment with my boyfriend Eli. It was in the back of a courtyard, just a little 2-story building. Our place on the ground floor, the same layout above us. I really loved that apartment. It felt bright, calm, a good place to live. We were honestly very happy there. Eli is an extremely light sleeper. Normally, if I so much as turn over too fast, he'll grumble, and if I turn on a light, forget it. He's awake instantly. On my side of the bed, I had this small, very classic night lamp. You know the type. Little fabric lampshade, open at the top, and when you turn it on, there's always this soft, yellowish circle of light on the ceiling. That detail is important. Another thing that matters, my mom, Sabine, is very into the paranormal. She's one of those people who has a pendulum, does energy work, cuts fire for burns, that kind of thing. I've always been more down to earth. I'm not a hardcore skeptic, but I'm the let's find a logical explanation first type. Or at least I was, before this. Anyway, that autumn I'd been sick for a while. Just this stubborn cough that wouldn't let up. It was keeping both me and Eli awake at night. He started finishing his nights on the couch because my coughing fits would jolt him awake over and over. It wasn't ideal, but we were managing. One night, my cough was especially bad. Eli was sleeping next to me in the bedroom, and for once, he seemed completely knocked out, which was already weird. I was lying there on my back, eyes open, just trying not to cough, trying to swallow it down, but the more I tried to control it, the worse it got. On top of that, I started to feel this anxiety. Not just, I'm sick and can't sleep stress, but a kind of creeping dread I couldn't explain. It felt like something heavy was slowly settling on my chest, and not just in the physical, I've been coughing for weeks way. Finally, I gave up and reached over to turn on my bedside lamp. The second the light clicked on, I got that something is wrong feeling in my stomach. At first, I thought it was just because Eli didn't react. No annoyed sigh, no rolling over, nothing. This guy wakes up if I breathe weird, but the light and my coughing didn't seem to touch him. Then I realized it actually looked darker in the room than it should. I frowned, blinked a few times, and looked up. Normally there's that warm circle for my lamp on the ceiling, but this time, the ceiling was in shadow. It was like the light from the lamp couldn't reach it. And the instant I really saw that, a wave of terror just ripped through me. It wasn't rational fear. It was that deep animal kind that makes your whole body go rigid. I tried to shake Eli a little, but I didn't insist. I just nudged his shoulder and whispered his name. Nothing. He didn't even stir. So I kept staring at the ceiling, which was just this dark, flat shape above me where the light should have been. And then, this is the part that's burned into my memory, I saw the shadows start to move. It looked like somebody had poured thick black paint on the ceiling, and now it was slowly sliding downward. These heavy streaks of darkness started crawling from the ceiling down onto the walls, very, very slowly. That was the moment my terror snapped me into action. My whole body screamed, "Get out!" The living room was right next to the bedroom, basically just a few steps away. I went in and turned on the main ceiling light, just a bare bulb with no lampshade. Bright, white light. The ceiling lit up perfectly normally. No strange shadows. Nothing. I sat down on the couch, clutching my phone, heart racing, eyes glued to the ceiling as if something might show up there too. And then, a few minutes later, I saw them again. The wall between the bedroom and the living room was in front of me. I was watching that wall when I noticed the shadows kind of bleed through it. They slid across from the bedroom side, spread over the living room ceiling, and started creeping outward. It was like the darkness itself had decided to move house. My instinct was to call my mom. I didn't even really think about it. I just opened WhatsApp and hit video call. It was around 2 in the morning. She picked up instantly, before the first ring even finished. I didn't say a word. I didn't even have time to say hello. She looked at me, a little dazed, and said, "I just dreamed that shadows were coming down from your ceiling." I remember my whole body going cold. I flipped the camera around and showed her the ceiling. You could clearly see the shadows spreading there, moving slowly, like they were sliding toward the light bulb. I told her I felt horrible. I was shaking, my chest tight, my cough worse than ever. I told her I was terrified. She told me to hold on, put the phone down for a second, and went to get her pendulum. To paint the scene a bit more, earlier that evening, Eli and I had watched a movie and eaten popcorn out of this big ceramic bowl. We'd left the empty bowl on the coffee table with a few kernels and some crumbs in it. I held the phone up so my mom could see the ceiling while she did whatever she does with her pendulum from a distance. I don't know exactly what she was asking or saying. She was murmuring things I couldn't make out clearly. While she was doing that, I started feeling worse. My cough got harsher, more violent, and I suddenly felt really nauseous. My whole body was buzzing with this horrible energy, and that anxiety I'd felt in bed was now full-blown panic. The shadows on the ceiling had mostly stopped moving at that point. They just hovered there, thicker around the bulb, like they were clinging to it. Then it hit me all at once, a huge wave of nausea. I grabbed the popcorn bowl and leaned over it, fully expecting to throw up the way you do when you're really sick. But what came out wasn't normal. It was like half a liter of clear, stringy mucus, almost transparent, thick, slimy. Not food, not bile, not anything I recognized. It looked exactly like what people describe as ectoplasm in those old stories. It was absolutely disgusting. And somehow, seeing it made everything 10 times worse. My fear shifted from, there are shadows on my ceiling, to, what on earth is leaving my body right now? When it was over, I tilted the bowl toward the phone and showed my mom. She didn't look surprised, just very serious. She told me, "Go throw that in the toilet right now. Flush it a couple of times. Then wash the bowl really well." So I did exactly that. I went to the bathroom, dumped the whole mess into the toilet, flushed again, then scrubbed the bowl with way more soap than necessary. The whole time, I felt shaky and exhausted, but also strangely lighter. When I walked back into the living room, the energy felt different. I sat down, phone in hand, and my mom and I talked for a little while. We tried to make sense of it, but neither of us could come up with anything that really explained it in a way that felt satisfying. Eventually, we were both wiped out, so we said goodnight. I still refused to go back into the bedroom, though. So I made myself a little nest on the couch, left the living room light on, and tried to rest. Eli stayed in the bedroom the entire night and never woke up once. Not from my coughing, not from the light, nothing. In the morning, he told me he'd slept oddly well, which, honestly, was the creepiest possible thing he could have said. By the time I got to work the next day, I hadn't slept at all. I was exhausted and still rattled, so I ended up telling 2 colleagues I trust about what happened. One of them, Clara, is very Catholic, very devout. The other, Nina, practices Reiki and shamanism. A pretty unexpected duo, I know. They both listened quietly, and then they offered to come back to my apartment with me after work to see if they could do something about it. Normally, I'd be skeptical of that kind of thing, but after the night I just had, I was willing to try anything that might help. When we got to my place, it was still daytime. Warm, sunny, no jackets needed. We decided to open all the windows to air out the energy, as Nina put it. I didn't want to go back into the bedroom yet, so I stayed out in the little courtyard while they went in. They both started saying they felt strange in the bedroom. Heavy, uncomfortable. I watched from outside. Both the bedroom and living room windows faced the courtyard, so I could see what was happening. Clara knelt down by my side of the bed and started praying. She said an exorcism prayer, St. Michael's, I think. Her lips were moving steadily, her eyes closed in concentration. And then I saw her breath. You know how, in winter, you exhale and you see that little cloud of mist? That. Except it wasn't winter. It was a mild, warm day. I wasn't seeing my breath at all outside. Only hers, inside the bedroom. She paused, looked out the window at me, and said, "You see that too, right?" I nodded. She told me it suddenly felt much colder in there. Meanwhile, Nina was walking slowly around the living room, burning sage. The smoke drifted lazily through the air. At one point, she stopped, took out her pendulum, and started asking questions out loud, reading from a small book she'd brought with her, using it as a guide. This went on for a while. Prayers in the bedroom, sage and pendulum in the living room. I just stood in the courtyard, watching, not daring to go in. Then, gradually, things changed. Clara's breath stopped showing in the air. She said the temperature in the bedroom was rising again, back to normal. Nina said she felt something unhook or lift. They both looked less tense, more relaxed. They came to the window and told me they thought it was okay for me to come back inside. I stepped into the apartment and there was a difference. The air felt lighter. It's hard to describe, but it was like an invisible pressure had been pressing down on the place, and now it was gone. Clara had to go home, but Nina stayed a bit longer to keep me company until Eli got back from work. Important detail. Nina had never been to my apartment before that day. She didn't know my building, my neighbors, anything. As we were talking, she asked me about the upstairs neighbor. I barely knew her. I knew her last name from the mailbox and had seen her a few times in the courtyard. That was it. We'd had short, polite chats, nothing more. I hadn't told Nina or Clara any of this. It just hadn't seemed important. So we're sitting there, and Nina is still kind of feeling the energy of the place, and out of nowhere she asks, "Is your neighbor upstairs called Mael?" I froze. I said yes. The mailboxes only had last names, so there was no way she could have seen it earlier. Then she started describing the neighbor, roughly how tall she was, how she wore her hair, the general vibe of her clothes. She got most of it right. She asked, "Is she okay? Is she very depressed?" I told her what the landlord had said, that she'd been gone for weeks, that she was in treatment somewhere, but as far as I knew, the lease was still in her name and her things were still in the apartment above. Nina thought about it for a moment, pendulum in hand, then told me what she believed had happened. She said my neighbor, Mael, was so unhappy and so deeply attached to her apartment that her sadness had sort of imprinted itself on the place. According to her, that emotional imprint had turned into some kind of entity or presence. And because I was physically weak, sick, exhausted, drained, that night I was more vulnerable. That's why I'd felt it, and that's how it had managed to reach into my apartment. She told me she'd done what she could to seal and protect my place. She said I should be safe now. And you know what? Since then, nothing strange has happened there again. The rest of the time we lived in that apartment was completely normal. When I eventually moved out a few years later, I found little signs of that day left behind by my friends. Tiny bottles tucked near the windows, small pentacles hidden in corners, a little prayer card under the foot of my bed, and a rosary I'd never noticed before. Quiet little protections, left there without telling me. I still don't have a good explanation for what happened that night, but I will never, ever forget the feeling of watching those shadows crawl down from the ceiling toward me. And sometimes I still wonder, has anyone else ever felt something like that? So, this happened on Halloween night, back in 2018. And honestly, it's still sitting with me like it just happened last week. At the time, my girlfriend, her name was Lena, and I were renting this 2-story apartment. Nothing fancy, creaky stairs, thin walls, that kind of place. Downstairs was where I spent most of my time. I had my computer set up down there, my little gaming cave. Upstairs, we had a small bathroom, our bedroom, and then this extra room. Lena had turned that extra room into her space, closet room, makeup table, a little fold-out futon for when friends stayed over. It always smelled like her perfume and hairspray up there. We weren't technically allowed to smoke in the apartment, but I was a pothead and not very creative about it. So my solution was always the same. Go up to that extra room, crack the window, and smoke there. I'd been smoking for over a decade at that point. Like, I had a high tolerance. Weed didn't make me see things or trip out. If anything, it just made me feel normal, calm. Lena worked nights at a restaurant, so most evenings I'd be home alone until around 10 p.m. or so. On this particular Halloween night, I'd finished my shift a little early. I got home, did my usual routine, grabbed my stuff, went upstairs to that extra room to smoke and hang out with my dog for a bit before heading down to the computer. It was around 6:30 or 7 p.m. It was already dark outside, the kind of early darkness you get in late October. I cracked the window, lit up a joint, and sat down on the futon. My dog, Max, he's a medium-sized mutt with way too much personality, hopped up next to me. I started scrolling through my phone, just zoning out on Instagram, taking lazy hits off the joint. I must have smoked about half of it when I suddenly realized something. Max had been barking. Not just one bark, like continuous barking. And I'd kind of tuned it out at first. You know how you can just disappear into your phone? But then it clicked. He'd been going off for a good 20 seconds, non-stop. That's not like him. So I pull my attention away from my phone and look straight ahead. Right in front of me is this old 3-drawer dresser that Lena used for some of her clothes. It had these 6 little metal drop handles, 3 on each side. For a second, my brain didn't really register what I was seeing. The top right handle was flapping, like actually lifting up and dropping down. Up, down, up, down, over and over. And nothing else was moving, just that one handle. At first, I was in total autopilot. I stood up, kind of annoyed, like, what is this thing doing? I walked over and grabbed the handle to stop it from moving. And the second my fingers touched it, my whole body went ice cold. I don't mean, oh, I felt a chill. I mean, it was like someone opened a walk-in freezer and shoved me inside. My chest tightened. The hairs on my arms stood up. In that exact moment, everything just clicked in my head. I let go of the handle. And the moment I let go, it started moving again. Up, down, up, down. A steady, weirdly rhythmic motion. Not fast, not frantic. Almost like someone on the other side was gently flicking it over and over. That's when my brain went from curious to pure survival mode. I bolted. I practically flew out of that room, down the stairs, heart pounding, adrenaline pumping so hard my hands were shaking. And then when I hit the bottom of the stairs, this horrible realization smacked me. Max is still upstairs. My dog was still up there, in that room, barking his head off at the dresser. So I swallowed whatever courage I had left and went back up. When I reached the top of the stairs and looked into the room, my stomach dropped. The handle was still moving. Same one, top right, just calmly, steadily flicking up and down like an invisible hand was playing with it. I rushed into the room, grabbed Max, he was still barking at it, growling a bit, and I ran back down the stairs with him, straight into the living room. We just sat there together, both of us wired and freaked out. First thing I did was call my friend Aaron. I didn't want to be alone, even if it was just over the phone. I told him everything, step by step, while I was still shaking. Just hearing another human voice helped a little, but I was still terrified. I think we stayed on the phone for a couple of hours until Lena got home from work. When she walked in, I unloaded the whole story on her. I could tell she was trying to stay calm, but she was freaked out too. From that night on, I hated going into that extra room. I still had to go in there to smoke, but I'd do it as fast as possible. Quick joint, eyes half on the dresser the whole time, and then I'd rush right back downstairs. I always kept the door to that room shut after that, because I didn't even want to see inside when I walked past. Our bedroom was right next to it, so at night, every time I went to the bathroom or downstairs for water, I had to walk past that door. I can't tell you how many times I speed walked that hallway like a little kid in a dark basement. A few days later, I ran into our neighbor, Marisol, who had lived in that apartment for over 10 years before we moved in. I tried to play it casual and asked her, kind of jokingly, if anything weird ever happened when she lived there. She got this look on her face. Not dramatic, just thoughtful. And then she said, "Well, actually, yeah." She told me that in the early 2000s, a young woman had overdosed in one of the upstairs rooms. She pointed upstairs, right in the area where our extra room was. Then she told me that her sister had been really sick at one point and moved in with her, staying downstairs, and that she'd passed away there, in the living room. I just stood there, nodding, trying to keep my face neutral while my brain was screaming, Of course this place has history like that." After that, little things kept happening. Not all the time, but enough that I couldn't just ignore it. One morning, for example, I had a half-full coffee mug sitting on the kitchen table. No one bumped it, the table was steady, and it slid. Just a good foot or so, right across the table. Slow, smooth, no spill. I stared at it for probably a full minute, waiting for my brain to come up with some kind of explanation. Vibration? Slanted table? Someone messing with me? Nothing made sense. But that dresser handle, that's the one that really stuck with me. I've gone over it in my head hundreds of times, trying to explain it away. Maybe the window draft did it, but the air was still that night. And even if there had been a breeze, why only that one handle? Why didn't any of the other 5 move at all? Why did Max notice it before I did? Why did I go ice cold the second I touched it? I've tried to be logical about it, I really have. But nothing fits. Nothing feels like a real explanation. Lena was so freaked out that she ordered sage and decided we were going to cleanse the place. So there we were, 2 scared people who had watched way too many paranormal shows, walking around the apartment with sage, putting salt on all the windowsills. We opened the windows and, out loud, told whatever was there that it had to leave, that this was our home now, that it wasn't welcome anymore. I keep thinking about that night though, about the handle, about Max barking before I even noticed, about that unnatural cold that went straight to my bones. I was always kind of a believer in the paranormal, open-minded about it, you know? But that night took maybe and turned it into, I'm sure. It completely shattered what I thought reality was supposed to be. And every Halloween, when it starts getting dark early and the air feels just a little heavier, I can still see that handle, moving on its own. Like something on the other side wanted to make sure I knew I wasn't alone. So, okay, let me tell you about one of the weirdest nights of my life. A couple of times a year, my whole family piles into cars and drives out to visit my grandpa. He lives in this tiny town tucked into the middle of the Mark Twain National Forest, like proper middle of nowhere. If you know the area, it's not too far from Elephant Rocks and Johnson's Shut-ins. Now, my family is kind of split down the middle on the whole paranormal thing. Half of them are very, ghosts aren't real, pass the potato salad. And the other half is, I absolutely will sage this rental car before we leave. I fall solidly into the, I believe something's out there camp. And so does one of my cousins. Let's call them Rin. So this one weekend, we've got my parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, all crammed into Grandpa's little house. There are like 12 of us in a place that feels like it was designed for maybe 4 people and a dog. It's cozy and loud and honestly, a little overwhelming. Plus, Grandpa's house has its own creepy history, but that's a whole other story. Anyway, not far from Grandpa's place, there's this small town park. It's got a little playground, swings, a rusted merry-go-round, a couple of picnic tables, and right up the hill behind it, there's an old cemetery. That park has always been our spot. When we were younger, my cousins and I would walk there in the afternoons to get away from the noise and just hang out. On this particular day, it's late afternoon sliding into early evening. The sky's going that soft golden color, and the air is starting to cool off. Rin is getting really overstimulated by all the chaos in the house, so they decide to walk to the park alone for a bit. Totally normal for us. We've been going there for years. They're gone maybe half an hour when the front door suddenly opens and they come back in, looking off. Not hysterical or anything, but definitely unsettled. They pull me aside into the hallway and go, "Okay, don't think I'm crazy, but there's this deer at the park and it is not acting right." So I ask what they mean, and they tell me they were sitting on the merry-go-round, just spinning gently, zoning out, when they noticed a deer standing at the edge of the field. At first, no big deal. We see deer all the time out there. But this one was just standing there, staring straight at them. Not grazing, not flicking its tail, not even twitching an ear. Just locked in. And then, instead of spooking and running off like normal deer do, especially in a place where people hunt a lot and you hear random gunshots pretty regularly, it started walking toward them. Slow, deliberate steps. Still staring. Rin told me, "I know it sounds dumb, but the way it looked at me, it didn't feel like an animal. It felt like a person in a deer suit." Naturally, this is exactly the kind of thing that gets my attention. Rin is spooked, and I am, unfortunately, the idiot cousin who responds to fear with, "Oh my God, let's go back and investigate." So I grab my backpack. Inside, I toss my tarot deck and my spirit box, the little radio device that flips quickly through stations so you can supposedly hear spirits talk through the white noise. Back then, I mostly used the FM sweep. Now I prefer AM, but at the time, FM was my go-to. We head back up the road to the park together. The sun is lower now, and the shadows from the trees are getting long. It's not dark yet, but we're inching close to the time when we're technically not supposed to be out anymore. We get to the playground, and sure enough, there it is. I remember slowing down and whispering, "Okay, that's weird." Because usually, by the time you get within sight of a deer, it's already decided you're a threat and bolted. But this thing? Nothing. It's like we were the ones on display. We sit on the merry-go-round because I figure if we're going to have a paranormal encounter, I at least want a place to sit down. I set the tarot deck next to me, pull out the spirit box, and turn it on. Normally, on FM, you get bits of music, commercials, little snatches of DJs talking, just chopped up noise as it flips through stations. But this time, nothing. Just static. No voices, no music, no station IDs. Just this low, constant hiss, which should be impossible, because literally the night before, we were using that exact spirit box in Grandpa's living room, maybe half a mile from where we're sitting now, and we were getting all kinds of radio bleed through. It was a clear day turning into a clear night. No storms, nothing that would mess with the signal. Rin and I exchanged this look like, okay, that's strike one. The static itself isn't terrifying, but there's something about it that makes the air feel heavier. Like we're sitting in a bubble cut off from the rest of the world. The deer is still staring. Every once in a while it takes a step closer, never breaking eye contact. I shuffle my tarot deck a little, mostly to give my hands something to do. I remember saying quietly, "If anyone's here, you can talk through this," like I've done 100 times before. And that's when things really start getting strange. First, this low fog starts to appear. I swear to you, it looked fake, like bad effects from an old horror movie. It clung to the ground and only came up to maybe my knees. I've seen ground mist before, but this felt placed almost. It stayed mostly around the field and the path, like it was avoiding the playground mulch. The deer starts walking closer again, slowly, carefully, like it's stalking us. At this point, it's close enough that I can see the shine in its eyes, and something about them just doesn't look right. Not glowing or anything dramatic, just too focused, predatory. And then, out of nowhere, this huge gust of wind slams into the playground. It's the first real wind we'd felt all day. It hits hard enough that my tarot cards scatter right off the merry-go-round, like someone slapped them out of my hands. A couple of them land face up in the dirt. I remember Rin saying, "Nope, nope, I'm done. That's it." I laugh, but it's that nervous laugh where you're trying not to show how much your stomach just dropped. I turn off the spirit box. The static suddenly feels unbearable, and we both start hurriedly picking up the cards. By now, it's getting pretty dim. The sun's almost down, and we are absolutely, definitely not supposed to be outside after dark. Between the fog, the deer, the radio doing its best impression of a void, and the wind conveniently timing itself to our little ghost hunting session, we both decide we've had enough. We start walking down the path that leads back to the street. The deer is still behind us in the field. We don't look back right away, but we can feel it. You know that feeling of being watched? It's like that, cranked up to 10. My skin feels tight, like I'm waiting for something to grab the back of my neck. We've got our backs turned when we hear it. Heavy, fast footsteps, hooves pounding the ground. We spin around just in time to see the deer bolting, not away from us into the open field, but across it and straight toward the tree line that leads up to the graveyard. I say this because there's a small building, a maintenance shed or something, between our path and the section of woods the deer ran into. In my head, that means we're safe. Line of sight is broken. There's a solid structure between us and it, so logically, it can't just pop up on the other side of us, right? We keep walking, a little faster now. We're about halfway to the street when we hear it, a rustle in the woods. But not from the side the deer just ran to, from the opposite side, the side with no building in between. We both freeze. The fog is thicker down by the path, and the trees just look like dark shapes pressed together. There's this strange silence, like the whole forest is holding its breath. No birds, no crickets, just our breathing and the fading echo of the spirit box static in my memory. And then we hear it. This laugh. That's the only word I have for it. A laugh. But it doesn't belong to any animal I've ever heard, and it sure as hell doesn't sound human. It's high and low at the same time, like two voices overlapping, one trying to sound like a person, the other trying to sound like a beast, and neither of them quite getting it right. It's wet and sharp and wrong. It feels like it crawls under my skin. Rin grabs my arm so hard their nails dig in, and that's all it takes. We don't say anything, we just run. Full on sprinting down the path, hearts pounding, not looking back, just focusing on the glow from the streetlights near Grandpa's road. We don't stop until we're back in his driveway, gasping for breath. The second we're inside and the door is locked behind us, the house feels weirdly normal again. Loud, warm, smelling like whatever's in the crock pot. We glance out the window once, but the road and trees are just dark and still. We tell a couple of our cousins what happened, but we keep it pretty low-key. Part of us is trying to rationalize it. Maybe the fog was just the temperature dropping. The deer was just oddly tame. The spirit box was glitching. Maybe the laugh was some weird bird or animal we don't know. But I can still hear it, even now, when I think about that night. And I've never heard anything like it before or since. We did go back to that park on later visits. Same playground, same graveyard up the hill, same little path back to the street. We never saw that deer again. Sometimes I wonder if it really was just a bizarre combination of normal stuff that our brains wove together into something terrifying. But if there's one thing I took away from that night, it's this. I don't really believe in coincidences anymore. So, I was 8 years old, and my brother Leo was 11. We were doing what kids do, racing our bikes up and down the street, when we heard this sharp screech of tires and then a car horn just blaring. You know that sound where, even as a kid, your stomach just drops because you know something bad happened? It was Clover, my girl. She was this little black cat with gold eyes, always getting into places she shouldn't. Laundry baskets, cardboard boxes, my backpack. But she didn't deserve what happened. I remember someone shouting, and then my mom pulling me back so I wouldn't see too much. But I still saw enough. It was a lot. Way more than an 8-year-old should ever see. We buried Clover in a corner of the backyard under the maple tree. I gave her my favorite blue blanket, the one with the rockets on it, because in my head, that meant she wouldn't be cold. Leo and I found a flat rock and scratched her name into it with a nail. It was crooked and messy, but we tried so hard to make it nice. Safe to say, it messed us both up, but it hit me harder. And being 8, I didn't know how grief worked. Nobody really sits you down and explains how your heart can hurt in a way that isn't physical, you know? So I came up with my own solution. I just decided she didn't die. That was it. In my mind, Clover was still alive. Every day after school, I walked home the same way. And every day, in my head, she'd still be there waiting at the streetlight on the corner, the way she always used to. I'd picture her trotting beside me down the driveway, into the garage, where I'd pour her food into this little metal bowl. The thing is, I actually kept doing it. I kept feeding her. I'd open the big bag of kibble, scoop some into the bowl, and talk to her like she was right there. "Hey, Clover, I'm home." Just like before. Over time, the food started piling up. The bowl would stay full, then the floor around it. You'd think I'd notice sooner, but I didn't. To me, Clover had to still be eating. In my mind, if she was still alive, it wouldn't hurt as much. A few months went by like that. One night, I was in my room getting ready for bed. It was one of those late fall nights. Dark way too early, a little windy, tree branches tapping the windows. I remember it so clearly. I was pulling on my pajamas, and something made me glance at the window. And there she was, sitting on the outside windowsill. A black cat, small, with those same glowing golden eyes, just staring in at me. For a second, my brain didn't question it. I just went, "Clover," like it was the most normal thing in the world. My heart started pounding, but in this weird, hopeful way. I yelled for my mom, then stopped because I thought, no, this is our thing. Mine and Clover's. I ran downstairs and out the back door, socks sliding on the tile. The air was cold, and the grass was damp. I could see the shape of her still sitting by my window, perfectly still, like she'd been waiting for me. "Clover," I called. She didn't look at me. She just turned her head and bolted toward the garage. I followed her, of course. I don't know what I thought I was going to do. Pick her up? Copy? Say sorry for letting her get out that day? I just knew I had to get to her. By the time I got to the garage door, my hands were shaking. I grabbed the handle, pulled it up, and it rattled on the track like it always did. And there she was. I took one step in, then another. That's when I heard it. A deep, low growl. Not like a cat. Too deep. Too wrong. It vibrated through the concrete floor and straight into my chest. Before I could figure out where it was coming from, a couple of paint cans on the shelf just fell. They crashed down onto my dad's drum set, this old set he kept in the corner. Cymbals clanged, the snare rattled, sticks rolled across the floor. It was so loud in that closed space that my ears rang. I froze, completely. Clover was gone. She'd been by the bowl a second before, I swear, and then she just wasn't. No running, no darting away, no sound, just empty space where she had been. I looked toward the back corner of the garage, where the light didn't quite reach. There's always that one corner in every garage that's darker than it should be, right? For us, it was where my dad kept boxes and old tools and stuff he meant to fix one day. And that's where I saw it. A shape. A black, shadowy figure that didn't look like it belonged to anything. Not tall enough to be an adult, not shaped like a kid, just wrong. Like darkness had peeled itself off the wall and decided to stand up. It started to move toward me. Not walking, more like gliding, slow, inch by inch. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to run, but I couldn't. I remember noticing how quiet it had suddenly gotten. No cars outside, no wind, no fridge humming. Just my heartbeat and the sound of my breath catching in my throat. I don't know how long I stood there. It felt like hours, but it was probably seconds. And then, like someone hit a switch, I could move again. I turned and ran. I sprinted across the driveway, tripped on the step, slammed into the back door, and fumbled the handle until it finally opened. I got inside, flew past my parents, who were asking what was wrong, and went straight to my room. I dove under the blankets and didn't come out. Not for a long time. After that night, I never saw Clover again. Not at the window, not in the yard, not in the corner of my eye, even when I wanted to. I don't know what I saw that night in the garage. I don't know if it was Clover's spirit, or my grief making me see things, or something else. Something that wasn't her at all. But I miss her. I still miss her. I think about it almost every day, honestly. I replay it in my head, trying to line up all the pieces like a puzzle that's missing just one corner. Why did she run into the road that day? Why did I see her at the window months after we buried her? Why did whatever that was in the garage feel so angry and so focused on me? I don't have answers. All I know is I loved a little black cat named Clover. She was my best friend. Losing her broke something in me. And that night in the garage, whether it was her or not, made sure I never forgot her. So, this all started for me back in the year 2000. At the time, I was in the British Army, and I'd just come back from a 5-month tour in Bosnia. I'd picked up an injury out there, nothing heroic, just one of those stupid things that happen when you're tired and in the wrong place at the wrong time. When we got home, instead of going back to barracks, I got sent to a military hospital for treatment and rehab. Now, if you've ever spent any length of time in hospital, you'll know this. Once the immediate drama is over, it gets really boring. Endless white walls, same faces, same routine. You're just sitting around with your thoughts. So one night, me and a few of the lads decided to mess about with a makeshift Ouija board. We didn't have a real one or anything. We tore up bits of card to make letters and numbers and drew a circle on a bit of cardboard we'd nicked from a supplies box. None of us had any idea what we were doing. It wasn't serious. It was just something to pass the time and spook each other a bit. Nothing dramatic happened with that, to be honest, but it kind of opened a little door in my head. A couple of days later, I heard from one of the orderlies that there was a disused morgue in an old wing of the hospital. It was in a part of the building that wasn't being used anymore. Down in the basement, no lights, locked most of the time, that sort of thing. And for reasons I still don't fully understand, one night I decided to go down there on my own. So I limped down this dark corridor, no lights on, Just that awful hospital silence where you can hear your own breathing and the echo of your footsteps. I find the morgue, push the door open, and it's absolutely pitch black inside. The sort of dark where you can't see your own hand in front of your face. I walked into the middle of the main room, sat down on this cold floor, flicked on my little cigarette lighter, and just started saying out loud, "Show yourself," over and over. I know how that sounds. It sounds dramatic, or like I thought I knew what I was doing. I didn't. I'd never read any occult books, never studied rituals or spells or any of that. I was just a bored, injured squatty in his early 20s, doing something stupid in a dark room for a bit of a thrill. Show yourself. Nothing happened. Eventually my lighter burned my thumb, I swore, laughed at myself, and left. I didn't connect any of this to what happened next, not at the time. About a week later, they gave me a weekend pass to go home. My mom, her name's Carol, lived about 180 miles away from the hospital. So I went home, did the usual. Cup of tea, catch-up, a bit of family tension like there always is when someone comes back from deployment. One evening, me and Mom got into an argument in the living room. I honestly couldn't tell you now what it was about. One of those stupid, emotional things that escalates when everyone's a bit tired. Rather than keep it going, I just walked out. I went through the kitchen and headed for the back door to get some air. I opened the door, stepped out into the garden, and there it was. Hanging in the sky behind the house was this enormous electric blue orb. It was hovering, almost perfectly still, maybe 60 or 70 feet up in the air. It was big, about the size of a minibus or one of those large transit vans. And it was glowing, like a ball of light but with substance to it. My first thought was, I'm seeing things. I'm more tired than I thought. I remember actually blinking hard, rubbing my eyes like a cartoon character, expecting it to vanish. But it stayed there. Same place, same intensity. Now, bear in mind, he'd just heard me and Mum having a row, so when I called him, he knew from my voice that this wasn't a joke. He came out into the garden and stood right next to me. I didn't take my eyes off the thing. I just pointed and said, "Can you see that?" And he said, "Yes." We both just stood there, staring up at this massive, silent blue orb. Then, without any sound at all, it dropped, just about a meter, like a tiny little dip, and then shot off horizontally at an unbelievable speed. It was like someone pressed fast forward on reality. 1 second it was there, the next second it was a streak, and then it was gone. It had been so close that, honestly, I felt like I could have hit it with a stone if I'd thrown one hard enough. We were still trying to process what we'd just seen when we noticed a second orb. Same kind of thing, glowing, blue-white, drifting across the sky, not quite as close this time, but still clearly visible. We watched it for a bit, and this is where it gets really strange. At one point, the orb did this distinctive maneuver. It sort of curved in a wide, smooth arc, and then paused. A few seconds later, we suddenly realized we were watching it do that exact same maneuver again. It was like time had folded, like we'd watched something, then somehow slipped back a few seconds, and were watching the same moment replay. It didn't feel like missing time in the usual sense. It felt like extra time, as if those few seconds had been added in rather than taken away. Eventually, that second orb shot straight up, vertically, into the sky. It accelerated so fast it vanished into the stars in about half a second. Years later, I tried to estimate how fast it must have been going, assuming I'd still be able to see something that size at airline cruising altitude. My rough maths put it somewhere around 40,000 miles per hour, going straight up, and all of it in total silence. Then came the third orb. This one looked like it was just going to pass by in the distance. I almost relaxed a bit, thinking, okay, I've seen enough. But then it suddenly changed direction. It did a clean 90-degree turn and came straight towards us. It stopped directly overhead. Again, it was so low I felt like I could hit it with a decent throw. Just hanging there above me and Mike, absolutely silent, this massive, glowing blue sphere. Mike looked at it for a moment and then said, "I've seen enough," and bolted back into the house. I stayed out there a bit longer, staring up at it. And then I started to notice the air around me. You know that feeling you get just before a lightning storm, when the hairs on your arms stand up and the air feels thick and charged? It was like that. The atmosphere felt static, heavy. That's when my bravado ran out. I remember thinking, this isn't just lights in the sky. Something is interacting with us. And I did exactly what he did. I turned and sprinted into the house. A few days later, I went back to the military hospital. Life went back to its odd little routine of physio, boredom, and bad food. I told no one at the hospital about what I'd seen at home. I didn't want to be tagged as the weird bloke who sees things in the sky. Then, one night, something else happened. I just got into bed. I remember it clearly because I wasn't even drowsy yet. I was fully awake. I lay back, my head touched the pillow, and in that exact moment, something appeared right next to my bed. It was a figure, an entity, about 7 feet tall, standing on my right side. It was so close it was practically pressed against the bed. It was completely cloaked, head to toe, in a black hooded robe. I couldn't see skin, I couldn't see a face, nothing. Just folds of dark fabric. 2 things about it really stuck with me. Second, the way it was leaning over me. If you or I lean over someone lying down, we bend our back in an arc, right? Head and shoulders forward, spine curved. This thing didn't do that. Its back stayed perfectly straight, like a board, and it just tipped forward from the hips, as if its whole upper body was a single solid piece. The posture was so unnatural that it made my skin crawl. Its arms hung straight down at its sides. It didn't move. It didn't speak. The moment it appeared, I realized I couldn't move, not even a finger. I wasn't asleep. I know sleep paralysis. I've had it on and off my entire life. This was not that. This was instant, total paralysis. The second my head hit the pillow. The only thing I could move were my eyes, so I used them. I remember my eyes flicking up and down, scanning its cloak, noticing the way the fabric fell, seeing individual folds in the material. It was there. It had weight. It was casting a sort of presence into the room that you could feel. I don't know how long it lasted. It might have been 10 seconds. It might have been a minute. Time goes strange in those moments. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it was gone. My body unlocked. I could move again. I lay there in the dark, heart hammering, absolutely terrified. I didn't tell anyone at the hospital about that either. The next night, I'd just had a shower. I was walking back down the corridor towards my room with a towel over my shoulder, thinking about nothing in particular. As I got close, I saw my roommate, we'll call him Lewis, standing outside our room in just his boxer shorts, talking to a couple of nurses. He had his back to me at first, but even from behind I could tell something was off. His body language was wrong. He was stiff, sort of hunched. When I came around to the side and saw his face properly, I've got to be honest with you. I've never seen anyone look that frightened in my life. He was gray. His eyes were huge, pupils blown wide. He was trembling, really shaking and mumbling, not making much sense. I asked the nurses, "What's going on? What's happened?" One of them said, "He says he saw something. A tall, cloaked figure leaning over your bed." My bed. The bed I hadn't been in yet. Apparently, he'd woken up in the night and seen this black cloaked being, tall, hooded, leaning over my empty bed, just like it had leaned over me the night before. I never mentioned my own experience to him. He never once asked me if I'd seen anything. We just lived around it, both of us clearly shaken, but no one wanting to open that particular door. For years after all this, strange things kept happening. Back home, I'd get bursts of electrical disturbances, lights flickering in ways that didn't feel like normal wiring issues, little balls of light, orbs, drifting across rooms and then vanishing, appliances turning themselves on and off. It became almost routine. At one point, the energy company sent me a letter saying I owed them thousands of pounds, which was impossible because I was on one of those pay-as-you-go meters and I was actually in credit. They sent a technician out to check. He looked at the meter, checked the readings, scratched his head, and basically said, "I have no idea how this much energy is being recorded. This shouldn't be possible if your meter's in credit." All the while, I kept seeing UFOs. Not every night, not even every month, but often enough that it stopped feeling like coincidence. Usually they were higher up, further away, points of light doing impossible maneuvers rather than those massive close-up orbs I saw that first night. I can't prove any of this to you. I don't have video footage or fancy measurements. All I have are my memories, and the fact that my stepdad saw what I saw, and my roommate saw what I saw, without any of us comparing notes in advance. I haven't had anything major happen for a long time now. No dramatic visitations, no huge orbs hovering over the garden. And honestly, I'm okay with that. I'm grateful for the quiet. But those nights, the morgue, the orbs, the cloaked figure in the hospital, they changed the way I see the world. I used to think everything had a neat, rational explanation, and a lot of things probably still do. But I also know that one night, I stood in my mom's garden and watched something impossible hang in the sky and then move in total silence at a speed that shouldn't be possible. And once you've seen something like that, it never really leaves you. So, let me tell you about the one time I swore I'd never step foot in a certain farmhouse again. This was quite a while ago now. I was maybe 17, 18 at the time. My girlfriend back then, let's call her Mia, her family owned this old farmhouse way out past town. It had been in their family for generations. You know the type. Peeling paint, sagging porch, a roof that always looked like it was one storm away from giving up, but somehow never did. The place sat on this little rise above a narrow creek, just trees all around. No neighbors, no lights from the road, just woods and water and that kind of silence you only get way out in the country. It was old and kind of falling apart, but Mia's family kept it going. They mainly used it as a hunting place in the winter. Her dad, her brother, their buddies would go out there, disappear into the woods at dawn, and drag themselves back at dusk smelling like cold air and campfire. Mia's parents were pretty relaxed about it though. They'd let her take friends out there some weekends and throw these little parties. Sometimes her brother Caleb and his friends, Jonah and Ty, would go out there just to do what country boys do. Shoot targets, ride four-wheelers, drink cheap beer, you know. By the time this happened, I'd already been out to the farmhouse a bunch of times. I knew the creaks in the floor, the way the wind whistled under the door, all of that. I wasn't really scared of the place, except for one thing, the hallway and the back bedrooms. So the way the house was laid out, you had the living room and kitchen up front, and then this long, narrow hallway that led to the bathroom and 3 bedrooms. And I don't know how to explain it, but that hallway always felt wrong. Like you were being watched from behind even when you knew nobody was there. The air just felt heavier back there. I'm not usually dramatic about that stuff, but I hated it so much that if it was late and I had to pee, I'd literally go out into the cold, dark woods with a flashlight rather than walk down that hallway alone. And we're talking pitch black country darkness, where you can't even see your hand in front of your face without a light. Still chose the trees over that hallway every time. Now, Mia had told me this one story about the farmhouse that stuck in the back of my head. Apparently, when she was younger, she and some friends had done an Ouija board session there one night. She said weird things happened, knocks on the walls, stuff moving a little on its own, that kind of thing. It scared her so badly she didn't go back to the farmhouse for a few years after that. Now, I'm weird with that stuff. I actually do believe in the paranormal, but for whatever reason, I've always been skeptical about Ouija boards specifically. Like, I kind of figured it was people subconsciously moving the planchette or just freaking themselves out. So I believed her in the sense that she was scared, but I didn't really buy that it was anything more than some girls psyching each other out in a creaky old house. Anyway, fast forward to the night. It was me, Mia, her brother Caleb, and his two friends, Jonah and Ty. So 5 of us total. All 3 guys, Caleb and his friends, were your textbook country boys. Good dudes, super chill. They were out there mainly to hunt, but when they came back in for the night, we'd all hang out, drink a little, smoke, play games, just mess around. So this particular night, it's pretty late, maybe close to midnight. We're all in the living room. We'd rigged up this bed sheet against the wall, and we're using a projector to play Mario Kart on it. There's bags of chips everywhere, empty cans on the coffee table, controllers getting passed around. It was just one of those cozy, dumb, fun nights. We're mid-game, right in the middle of a race, when suddenly, boom, like the loudest crash I've ever heard inside a house. Not just a noise, but one of those sounds you feel in your chest. The kind that snaps everybody out of whatever they're doing at the exact same time. All of us jumped up. The controllers hit the floor. Nobody was laughing anymore. For a second, we just stared at each other like, "Did you hear that too?" And then we all kind of agreed it had definitely come from the back of the house, from the hallway, from the bedrooms I already hated. The first thing we thought was, a tree fell on the house. It made sense. A big limb, maybe, or an old dead tree finally giving out and slamming onto the roof. That had actually happened before to one of the sheds on the property, so it wasn't a crazy idea. We're all talking over each other a bit, trying to act like it's not a big deal, but you could see it on everyone's face. We were spooked. So we grab a couple flashlights and head down that hallway together. Nobody was volunteering to go alone, I'll tell you that. First bedroom on the left, totally normal, nothing out of place. Window intact, no branches through the ceiling, bed where it should be. Second bedroom, also normal. Same thing, quiet, untouched. Then we get to the last bedroom at the very back, the one Caleb had claimed earlier, the one I already didn't like. And the second we step into the doorway, my stomach just drops. Everything in that room, everything, was piled up against the wall on the right side. Not messy, like someone had been rummaging around. Not knocked over randomly. I mean the bed frame, the mattress, the recliner, both dressers, a couple of lamps. Every single big piece of furniture had been shoved or thrown into this angled heap, pressed against that wall. The bed was almost upright, like somebody had grabbed it and tried to stand it on its side. The recliner was tilted at this weird angle on top of it, one of the dressers halfway over, the lamps crushed in between. It looked like a giant invisible hand had swept across the room from left to right and just dragged everything with it. And here's the thing that really got me. That room had been completely normal earlier that day. I'd seen it. Caleb had dropped his duffel bag on the floor by the bed. His stuff was spread out a little, nothing dramatic, just a regular, slightly cluttered room. Now his bag was nowhere we could see, and the room looked like it had been hit by some kind of, I don't even know. Not an earthquake, not an animal. It was too precise and too strong at the same time. My whole body went cold. You ever get that full body chill where your fingers feel numb and you can feel your heartbeat in your throat? That was me, standing in that doorway. Nobody said anything for a good few seconds. We all just stared. Then, all at once, everybody started talking. "Bro, what the? How? That's not funny. Who did this?" Jonah, who was usually the loudest skeptic about any kind of ghost stuff, just kept saying, "No, nope, no way, that's not real," over and over, like he was trying to convince himself. I finally managed to find my voice and just said, "We need to go, like, right now." And everybody agreed instantly. No argument, no macho, "Let's stay and figure it out." We backed out of that room, down the hallway, and then it was full panic mode. We grabbed whatever we called essentials in that moment: keys, phones, wallets, one or two random jackets, and bolted out the front door. Caleb didn't even try to go back for his bag. And this dude was the type to double-check the truck doors 3 times before leaving somewhere. That night, he just left it. Didn't seem to care at all. We piled into the truck, slammed the doors, and Caleb just drove. I remember looking back at that dark outline of the house in the rearview mirror and thinking, I am never going back there again. We ended up at Mia's parents' place in town. It was late, but the lights in the living room were still on. They were sitting there, watching TV, completely relaxed, having no idea what we'd just seen. We all start trying to explain at once. 5 freaked out kids tripping over each other, talking about how the whole back bedroom had been rearranged in a single instant, how everything was piled up, how there was this huge crash. Mia's parents are pretty religious too. Not mean or anything, just very firm in their beliefs. Her dad, Mr. Walker, listened for a minute and then just kind of sighed. You could tell he thought we were exaggerating or trying to scare Mia or playing some dumb prank. Mia and Caleb kept insisting, though. They were practically begging him to go out there and look. It wasn't unusual for him to drive out to the farmhouse to fix things or check on the place, so finally he said something like, "All right, I've got errands to run out that way. I'll check on it." He didn't go that night. He said it was too late and he didn't want to drive the back roads half asleep. So he went a couple days later. When he came back, we were all waiting to hear what he'd say. I remember my heart pounding, hoping he'd at least admit that something was off, that maybe a beam had fallen or a floorboard collapsed, anything that would make sense. He walks in, puts his keys down, looks at us, and he is annoyed. "The house is fine," he says. "Nothing's out of place." We're all staring at him like, "What do you mean nothing's out of place?" He goes on, "The bedroom's exactly how it always is. Bed is made, dressers where they belong, chair by the window. Caleb, your bag is sitting on the end of the bed, right where you left it." I felt this weird mix of anger and dread, because I know what we saw. I can still see that bed nearly vertical, the chair on top of it, the way the lamp was crushed. And now he's telling us it looks like a normal room again, like nothing ever happened? In just a couple of days? He thought we were messing with him. He actually got kind of mad, said we'd wasted his time, that we'd cooked up some ridiculous story, maybe moved stuff around ourselves and then forgot we did it. We tried to explain, but he just wasn't hearing it. In his mind, there was no room for that kind of thing to be real. I didn't argue. Honestly, I didn't even have the energy to. I just remember thinking, either something supernatural happened, or I'm losing my mind. But here's what I know. 5 people saw that room in total chaos. 5 people heard that crash. And 5 people were scared enough to leave a bag of hunting gear and clothes behind and drive off into the night without looking back. I never went back to that farmhouse. You know, every time I talk about this, my chest gets tight all over again. This happened about 12 years ago now, but it still feels like last week when I let myself really remember it. Back then, I'd been married for a couple of years, and my husband Arun and I were living in his old family home, the kind of place with creaky wooden floors and doors that don't quite close all the way. It wasn't a bad house, just old, full of history, full of shadows. One evening, his mother, Lila, suddenly got very sick. High fever, too weak to even sit up. Arun had work early the next morning, so I told him, "You stay home and rest. I'll sleep over at your mom's tonight, just in case she needs anything." His younger cousin, Mira, who was about 12 at the time, also decided to stay at her auntie's place that night. She adored Lila and didn't want to leave her alone. So, it ended up being the three of us in the same bedroom, Lila on the bed, Mira at the other edge, and me on the floor beside them. I remember saying, half joking, "You two princesses get the bed, I'll sacrifice myself to the tiles," and we laughed a little. I spread a thin mattress on the floor, laid a blanket over it, and wrapped myself up as best I could. It was raining that night. Proper monsoon rain. The kind that rattles the windows and makes the whole house feel damp and colder than it actually is. The wind slipped through the cracks and made this low whistling sound, like the house was breathing. Sometime after midnight, everything went quiet. You know that deep silence when even the rain slows and all you can hear is your own pulse in your ears? It was that kind of silence. I was lying on my side, facing the bed. I could see the outline of Lila's back, Mira curled up at the edge. I was just slipping into that space between awake and asleep when something changed. At first, I couldn't tell what it was. Just this feeling, like the air around me had gotten heavier. And then I heard it. Breathing. Not mine, not theirs. It was right next to me, right above the blanket. Slow at first, then heavy, strained, almost wet sounding, if that makes sense. I could feel it against my face, this warm, uneven breath, like someone was leaning over me, inches away. My first thought was that Mira maybe got scared and climbed down to sleep next to me. I tightened my fingers under the blanket, about to lift it and say, "Hey, it's okay, I'm here." But I realized the breathing wasn't at my side. It was above me, directly above, like something was bending over my body. My heart started hammering. Suddenly, I was very, very aware of how cold the floor was under my back, how every little sound in the room stood out. I thought, no, I'm just imagining it. I'm tired. I'm worked up from the day. So I tried to calm myself down. I told myself, just turn on the lamp. Once there's light, you'll laugh at yourself. I slowly slid my hand out from the blanket, feeling for the little table where the lamp was. I knew exactly where it should be. I'd turned it off myself. My fingers were still halfway there when it happened. Something stepped on my foot. Not lightly, not like a brush or a nudge. A full, solid weight pressing down on the top of my right foot through the blanket. Heavy, deliberate. I can't describe the kind of terror that hits you when your mind cannot explain what's happening. It's like your whole body just shuts down. The breathing was still there, right above me. Slow, labored. And then I felt the blanket move. You know how it feels when a cat walks across your legs under a blanket? That slight dip, that shifting weight, step by step. That's what it felt like, except it was heavier, and it started near my feet and moved up, across my shins, my knees, my thighs. Nothing was touching my bare skin, but I could feel the weight through the blanket, dragging the fabric with it, creeping up my body. I thought, if I don't do something now, it's going to reach my chest, my face. I don't know where the courage came from. Maybe it was pure panic. With my hand still shaking, I grabbed the edge of the blanket and, in one quick motion, flung it off my body. The breathing stopped. The weight vanished. And there was nothing. No one standing there. No one crouched over me. Just the dim outline of the room, the old cupboard, the chair, the curtained window. The bedroom door was closed, the latch still in place from the inside, just as I'd left it. I jerked my head toward the bed. Lila was lying on her side, sleeping soundly, breathing slow and even. Mira was on her back now, mouth slightly open, soft little snores coming out. Neither of them had moved. My thin mattress was still where I'd laid it on the floor, but the blanket I'd thrown off, that's what made my stomach drop. It wasn't spread out beside me the way it should have been. It was crumpled near my feet, bunched up and twisted, as if someone had actually been standing on top of it a moment ago before stepping away. That was it for me. I grabbed the blanket, scrambled off the floor, and practically launched myself onto the bed between Lila and Mira. I didn't care about waking them. I didn't care how ridiculous I looked. I pulled their blanket over all three of us and just lay there, eyes wide open, staring at the dark ceiling. My heart wouldn't slow down. Every little sound, every creak, every gust of wind felt like something creeping closer. I didn't sleep for even a second. I just waited, counting the minutes in my head, begging for the sky to lighten. Eventually, a faint gray started to seep in through the curtains. You know that soft color the world turns just before sunrise? That's when I finally dared to move. I carefully eased myself off the bed, trying not to wake them, and looked down at the floor where I'd been lying. The mattress was still there. The blanket was still crumpled near my feet, just like I remembered. I told myself again, "You imagined it. Nothing stepped on you. You were half asleep." It felt real, but it wasn't. And then I looked at my foot. Right on the top of my right foot, where I'd felt the weight, was a mark. Not a bruise exactly, not a clean shape. It looked wrong. Like a burn that wasn't really a burn. Angry red, faintly swollen, with this odd shape that wasn't quite a hand, wasn't quite a footprint either. Almost like long, stretched out fingers or claws that hadn't fully formed. I remember just staring at it, feeling my throat go dry. I pressed around it with my fingers. It hurt, dull, deep pain, as if something had really pushed down hard. The skin felt hot to the touch, even though the rest of me was cold. There was no way I could explain that to myself anymore. A dream doesn't leave a mark like that. An overactive imagination doesn't burn itself into your skin. For days, that mark stayed on my foot. It faded slowly, like a bruise, but the outline, the weird, finger-like shape, lingered longer than it should have. Every time I glanced at it, that night came rushing back. The breathing, the weight, the way the blanket crawled up my body. Even now, after all these years, when I really sit with the memory, I can hear it. That slow, heavy breathing right in front of my face. I can feel that pressure on my foot. I remember lying there on the floor, knowing that something was in the room with us. You can call it a trick of the mind if you want. Maybe that makes it easier to sleep at night. But I was awake. I remember the sound of the rain, the chill in my fingers, the exact position of every piece of furniture in that room. I was fully there, and whatever pressed down on my foot left something behind, both on my skin and in my head. What haunts me the most isn't the breathing, or even the strange print. It's the feeling I had in that moment on the floor, that absolute certainty that whatever was standing there was not human. Alright, let me tell you something I don't usually talk about in detail. My name is Kareem. I'm an engineer, and these days I live and work in Cairo. But what I'm about to share with you started years ago, in my hometown in Upper Egypt, near Minya. This isn't a short story. It stretched over almost 10 years, from 2012 until 2022, right up until a few months before I moved here. And I swear to you, those years changed me completely. Even now, when I remember some of what happened, I feel my skin crawl. Back then, I'd been married for about 4 years. My wife Salma and I were living in this tiny apartment in the middle of the city. It was noisy, cramped, full of life, but it was home. When our lease ended, we thought, why not look for something calmer? Something a bit bigger, a bit quieter. So we found this apartment on the outskirts of town. It was in a small building, away from the traffic, with some trees around it and a nice empty lot where the kids could one day play. Peaceful, fresh air. It felt like a good new beginning. We had no idea we were walking straight into a nightmare. At first, everything was normal. We unpacked, we painted a wall or two, argued over where to put the sofa, just the usual stuff. The neighbors upstairs were a small family, and they were going on a short trip the week we moved in. We heard them dragging their suitcases down the stairs, laughing, talking. They waved goodbye. They never came back. On the way home, they had a terrible accident. A bus hit their car. Every single one of them died. After that, the building changed. People started moving out. Within a few months, it was basically empty. Just us on the first floor, and one locked apartment on the ground floor that no one ever seemed to visit. That's when the nights started to feel longer. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was heavy, like the whole building was holding its breath. While we slept, we'd hear footsteps in the living room. Slow, careful steps, as if someone was trying not to wake us. I'd get up, heart pounding, tiptoe out, switch on the light. Nothing. Doors closed, windows locked. Just that ugly old couch staring back at me. Then came the knocks. Very soft at first. 3 light taps on the front door. I'd look through the peephole, and the hallway would be completely empty. Sometimes I'd fling the door open right away, just to catch whoever was messing with us. Nobody. Not even a sound on the stairs. We told ourselves, it's an old building. Maybe the pipes, maybe the wood is expanding. You know how it is. You try to rationalize. But the sounds didn't stop. In fact, they got louder, bolder. The feeling that someone else was in that apartment with us grew stronger every single night. Eventually, Salma looked at me one evening and said, Kareem, I can't sleep here anymore. Let's leave. Let's just start over somewhere else. So we left. We thought distance would solve the problem. We moved to a new city, into one of those half-finished developments out near the desert road. Wide streets, new buildings, but very few people. At night, the whole neighborhood was so quiet that you could literally hear your own breathing. From the first night there, I felt it. You know when you're not alone, even if you can't prove it? That's how it was. A presence, watching, waiting. The noises came back. Soft shuffles, things nudged out of place. Sometimes a door would be slightly open when I was sure I'd closed it. The house felt aware of us. My son Omar was around 8 at the time. One afternoon he walked up to me, very serious, and said, Baba, why didn't you answer me yesterday when I called you from the bathroom? He said. At night, after you and Mama went to sleep, I called you, and you came out of the bathroom and went into your room. I saw you. Why didn't you answer me? I just stared at him. Omar, I never got out of bed last night. I didn't even go to the bathroom. He looked at Salma. She shook her head. Neither did I, Habibi. I watched the color drain from his face. Then, who was it? He whispered. I swear I saw you. Same clothes, same way you walk. I didn't know what to say. I felt this cold weight settle in my chest. A few days later, Omar and my daughter Lena were messing around with my phone, taking selfies in the living room. Suddenly, they came running to us, almost tripping over themselves, both of them shaking. "Baba, look! Look at this!" In the picture, you could see Omar and Lena smiling awkwardly, their faces close together. But behind them, between their shoulders, there was a third face. It wasn't even a proper face, just this pale, smudged shape where a head should be. No eyes, no mouth, but somehow you could feel it staring. That night, the fear came right to our bed. I woke up in the middle of the night with this heavy pressure on my chest, like something was sitting on me. My muscles hurt, my head felt thick. I forced my eyes open, and what I saw still haunts me. Someone, was sitting on Salma's pillow. Not on the mattress, on the pillow. Its hands were wrapped around her head, not squeezing violently, but firm, deliberate, like it was testing how much force it needed. I yelled and pushed myself up. The figure turned its head toward me. I couldn't make out its features clearly, but I could feel its attention. Then it slid off the bed, no sound, just this gliding movement, and walked on the tips of its toes toward the living room. I ran after it, my heart in my throat. The living room was empty. That was the first time I called a sheikh I knew, Sheikh Abdullah. I told him everything, every detail. He listened quietly, then said, "Kareem, it may be the spirits attached to the house itself, or to something you brought with you. As long as they don't harm you, try not to be afraid. Fear feeds them. But if it gets worse, recite this prayer every day." He dictated the prayer to me. I wrote it down, then later that evening I sat in the living room with my phone in my hand, reading it out loud. I got halfway through a verse when the phone just flew out of my hand. It didn't slip. It didn't fall. It was yanked. It shot out of my grip and landed in the middle of the room with a loud crack on the tiles. Salma saw the whole thing. She screamed, "How did that just happen?" I was shaking. "Good," I said. "Good. At least you saw it too. It's not just in my head." I called my friend Mahmoud and told him everything from start to finish. He said he'd talk to another sheikh he knew and get back to me. 2 days later, just before dawn, Salma shook me awake. Her hands were ice cold. "Kareem, wake up. Please wake up." I sat up, half asleep. "What's wrong?" She said, "I was asleep, and I felt something holding my hand, like a small, cold hand. I opened my eyes, and there was a white shadow sitting beside the bed." She swallowed, tears in her eyes. "It didn't have a clear face, but I heard it, Kareem. It said, 'I can't go on anymore.'" I asked her, "Who said that?" "The shadow," she whispered. "The shadow said it, and then it turned into smoke and disappeared." That was my breaking point. My nerves were shredded. I couldn't pretend this was old pipes or noisy neighbors anymore. I told her, "We're leaving. I don't care where we go. We're not staying here." We started preparing to move. For a short while, strangely, things quieted down. We thought, maybe it's over. Maybe it knows we're leaving the day we actually planned to move out. That was the worst of it. I was in the living room, chatting with Mahmoud on the phone, giving him some details about the movers. Salma was in the bedroom, getting dressed so we could go sign some papers. Suddenly, a scream tore through the apartment. I dropped the phone and ran to the bedroom. Salma was standing in front of the mirror, her back to the bed, one hand on her chest, gasping, pointing at the mattress. "Look! Kareem, look there!" I followed her finger, and my blood ran cold. On the sheet, right where she'd been sitting just minutes before, there was a face. Not drawn with a pen or dirt, more like formed in the fabric. A twisted, inhuman face with a mouth stretched too wide and dark hollows where the eyes should be. The strange thing is, from where she was standing, she hadn't noticed it at first. She only saw it in the reflection of the mirror. Then she turned around and realized it was really there. I pulled out my phone, yes, the same one, and took a picture. I still have that photo. There was no, "we'll wait until tomorrow." That very night, we left that apartment. We found another place in the same city, closer to my work. It seemed safe, normal. New building, families around, kids riding their bikes in the street. I told myself, this is it. This time, we'll start over for real. But during the first week, little things started happening. Not dramatic, just wrong. I was unpacking, moving bags between rooms. I set one bag by the door to take it to the kids' room. I went to get something from the kitchen, came back, and the bag was in the middle of the hallway. No one else was even upstairs. I pushed the thought away. Maybe I forgot. Maybe I left it there myself. The next day, I was putting up curtains. I left one of the curtain rods on the table in the living room while I measured and drilled a hole in the wall. When I turned back, the rod was gone. Salma came in and said, "Didn't you just put it right there?" We searched everywhere, moved the sofa, checked behind the fridge, even opened suitcases we hadn't unpacked yet. Nothing. That curtain rod was just gone, as if the floor had swallowed it. Then came the day that finally broke me. One morning, after the kids had gone to school, I left for work as usual. Around noon, Salma called me. Her voice was shaking. "Kareem, when are you coming home?" I said, "What's wrong? What happened?" She took a breath and said, "After you left, I tried to get some sleep. I lay down, closed my eyes, and suddenly I heard this loud banging above the closet, like something jumping." She continued, "I opened my eyes and looked up, and there were so many of them, Kareem. Tiny creatures, maybe 20, maybe more, hopping and running on top of the closet. Their faces were blurred, not like human faces. My whole body went cold." She said, "I felt something grab my hair and pull it upwards. I couldn't move. And then a voice in my head said, 'Look, don't close your eyes.' I whispered, 'What did you do?' She said, 'I answered it in my mind. I don't know why, but I said, 'I want to see your face.'" She paused for a moment, then went on. One of them stopped, turned toward me. It took off a little hat it was wearing, like a small cap, and underneath was this white face. Pale, smooth, like porcelain. A little like those Japanese masks you see in movies. But the eyes were full of hatred. It stared at me like it was saying, "Are you challenging me?" "And then," she said, "the moment I heard your key in the door downstairs, they all ran. They jumped into the closet and disappeared. When I got home and saw her, she looked like she'd been sick for a week. This wasn't just fear anymore. It was exhaustion, like her soul was tired." We packed what we could, left some things behind, and we left that city. Since then, alhamdulillah, nothing strange has happened. No footsteps, no shadows, no faces in photographs. The kids sleep better. Salma smiles more. Our home feels like a home again. But sometimes, late at night, when the lights are off and the apartment is quiet, I remember the soft knock on that first door, back in that first building, and I can't help wondering, did we escape it? Or did it simply decide to stop following us?